Good evening and welcome to the 11th meeting of fiscal year 2025 for the Milton Planning Board. At this time, I would like to now call the meeting to order. And apologies, we are having a little bit of technical difficulty. We have our audio, but we cannot promote our videos. So we are all present and I'll have everybody introduce themselves, starting with the members of the board. Cheryl,
Cheryl Tagaya, Secretary.
Maggie,
Maggie Oldfield, member.
Jim,
Jim Davis, member.
and Meredith Hall serving as chair. With us tonight, we have our staff. Tim?
Hi, so you can see somebody. Tim Zawinski,
We can see-
Director of Planning and Community Development.
Great. And Cheyenne? Yes.
Cheyenne Frazier, Assistant Director of Planning and Community Development.
And Julia?
Julia's here. She's just not in the panel. She's coming on right now.
Okay.
Julia
Okay.
Gibbon, Clerk.
Great. Great. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for those who are attending on Zoom. We'll first begin with our administrative items. We have for our upcoming meetings, we have our next regularly scheduled meeting for November 7th. And then we are scheduling, I think tentatively, but it looks like it's moving forward. And Tim can speak more about this on November 14th, doing a MBTA public forum on where we are in the process. And then our next regularly scheduled meeting will be on November 21st. So with that, we can now move to the approval of our minutes, unless Tim, you wanted to add anything to those dates.
No, the 7th for a standard meeting and the 14th for a public forum on MBTA communities is what we're looking for in the near future.
Great, great. And so we have two sets of minutes to be approved, September 16th and September 26th. So has everyone had a chance to review those edited minutes?
Yeah,
No.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
What were the dates again, Meredith? I'll make a motion.
September 16th and September 26th.
I'll move to approve the minutes of September 16th and September 26th.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And we'll do a roll call since Sean is not here. That would be Maggie,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
and myself, yes. And I just, I did want to just say, Sean is not here. He will be hopefully joining us at our next meeting. When we last met and gathered, we sadly announced the passing of Sean's wife, Janice. And last weekend, there was the most incredible outpouring from the community, a wake on Friday night and a service on Saturday morning. And I just thought it spoke so much about our community and how everybody comes together just to show support and love and care for the Fahey family. And we just want to let them know that we are continuing to think about them and we are here for whatever they may need, and just have our full support by the board and by the staff, and really the community abroad is just is so affected so deeply by the loss of Janice. So we will hopefully be seeing Sean, but we understand right now he is taking care of things at home. So thank you on that. And now, Tim, the report from the Director of Planning and Community Development.
Thank you, Meredith, and thank you for those kind words. Sean's family is in all of our thoughts and prayers right now. So hopefully we'll see him soon. So I actually was late to the last meeting, and you probably announced it, but I'll be leaving my role as Director of Planning and Community Development at the end of November. So these are our last few meetings together. You all do fine without me, no worries. But in the meantime, I've been meeting with the town administrator, kind of talking through some sort of transition planning stuff. I'm working with Cheyenne and Julia to kind of get ourselves situated so that there are firm hands on the tiller if there's any kind of period where between my absence and a new director coming on. One of the things that we've been talking about is I think in terms of kind of like the day-to-day, getting meetings set up, processing applications, making sure that ads get in the paper. Julia and Cheyenne, 100% capable of kind of handling that work. I think in terms of managing the existing kind of current consultant work that we have, getting folks into meetings, getting folks on the agenda. Again, I think we should be all set with that. Our consultants are all very capable. They're familiar with the town. They're familiar with the board. And we'll be able to facilitate their needs. And Meredith, I know you called earlier this afternoon. We didn't get a chance to connect,
Yeah.
but we'll want to try to pin down as much as possible in the next two or potentially more meetings that we have together. Site plan approval, zoning, and ADU zoning. ADU zoning is a little bit more kind of tricky. I know we've been kind of hoping, crossing our fingers that we would get some indication of regulations from the state about that. Those haven't come out yet. It's a little bit of a black box at HLC in terms of if and when they come out. So I understand the board's reluctance to kind of go too far down that road without those regulations. But at the very least, I think having a plan in place for how we're going to approach those two articles. And then obviously, depending on the outcome of the SJC case, getting language together for an MBTA Communities article if that's necessary. Those will be three kind of relatively big tasks that the town administrator will want to know, like, will it be necessary to maybe, if there's, again, a lag between hiring a new director and sort of me leaving, if additional consultant kind of on-call planning, assistance will be needed. So I think not asking anything of anyone right now, just kind of putting it on your radar that, we'll be keeping a close eye on, the progress that we're able to make between now and the end of November on those three things, and then kind of assessing with the town administrator's office where we are in the search, and if we'll need additional assistance. So just stay tuned for that. But I think in the meantime, let's try to be cognizant of getting as much done as we can before there's some tricky kind of staffing issues. So that's all I've got for now. I don't know if Cheyenne, you had anything additional that you wanted to add.
Nope, that covered everything.
Maggie has her hand up and Cheryl has her hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering, in case there is a lag between your absence and hiring somebody new, and if we are feeling pressure to get some zoning language done, is it appropriate for town council to help write that zoning language? Is that under his purview to help us?
Absolutely. And I think whether or not we can definitely talk to the town administrator about the extent to which a more hands-on approach from town council is feasible. That could be something that's an option. So yeah, I think that's definitely on the table in terms of assessing kind of what the options are. And again, I think to the extent that we can get at least a skeleton of something together. I know we've got a framework for site plan approval right now. I think we'll want to talk about that in a little bit more detail at the next meeting. We do have also a framework for an ADU article, based on the previous one, and Cheyenne's been working on that to make some edits to make it consistent with the new state law. So the more that the board kind of can get done on its own with my assistance and Cheyenne's assistance, to hand off to town council, the better. And then, just depending on, what the board's kind of needs and desires look like, in the future on this stuff, whether or not, additional consultant assistance kind of needs to be kind of brought on. But I think a long-winded way of answering your question, like, yes, we should definitely have town council involved.
Yeah, because my understanding is, he's not only our town council, but he's council to other towns. And especially like with the ADU language, which is new, I'm assuming that his office is, reviewing, because it is, even though zoning, it's legal language. And so I would think that his office would be actively helping other towns too.
Yeah, I'm almost certain that's the case. So, that'll be something I think on, potentially an agenda item at the next meeting, just to kind of, figure out kind of game plan, what the board thinks it's going to need. And then we can go from there. Because I think, the extent to which, all of this work gets kept in-house, I think works, better for everybody. But, again, also there is the option of going out and trying to find someone to come in and help on a kind of temporary on-call basis. But it's up to the board to kind of figure out what its kind of medium-term strategy is going to be.
Okay, thank you.
Cheryl has her hand up. Yeah, thank you, Maggie.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yes, first, I want to thank Tim for all of his efforts on behalf of the town and behalf of the board. I think he's going to be sorely missed, not only by us, but by many others in town, applicants included. And I just want to wish him well in his next endeavor. And again, thank him for all that he's done. Secondly, I just want to, just speaking of what we need to get done before Tim leaves, we have the Goddard School Daycare Center on Blue Hill Ave, and I believe they're scheduled to come in our next standard meeting on the 7th. And did we
Yeah.
also say that we were going to be doing reviewing the site plan approval zoning framework at that same meeting?
I would like to, if we could. I think Tim put together a really good framework, and I have some thoughts of adding some things that I know Cheryl, you did as well to that
Right.
framework, sort of beefing up what that skeleton framework is. Maybe I can even have that Cheyenne work on that and just have that ready for our meeting on the 7th to be more.
So did we want to share our comments in advance of that meeting on the site plan approval? Are we planning to review it at the meeting itself?
I think so. Yeah, so if you
So
could have
send
your
in-
comments,
Send in advance, okay.
I think that would be great. And
Okay, then one last thing, just in terms of efficiency of the use of our time, I think tonight we have 2 primary agenda items. I think it would be great if we could do something similar on the 7th. I don't know if 2 is the right number, but some of the meetings have had a lot of agenda items by necessity. I understand, but I think we can be more productive in this time if we can focus each meeting very deliberately. So thank you.
thank you, Cheryl. That's great. And Jim, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just wondering is, with the ADU bylaw, for some reason I remember a 6-month deadline. Tim, is there like a hard deadline for this, or is it just something we want to get done before the state puts this out there?
So the law becomes effective 6 months after its passage. So I think we came out to like February 2nd or 3rd or whatever was 120 day. No, what is 6 months? Whatever.
180?
Yeah, 180. Wow, math. So it's to the extent that there's a deadline, it's early February. What that really means is that the law becomes effective, and if you I know that APA Mass Chapter ran a couple webinar sessions around kind of what the state of kind of everyone's thinking is. It's not entirely necessary to have an ADU bylaw. There is enough in the statute to enable the building commissioner to issue building permits. That being said, I think that there are some specific dimensional requirements that I think the board would probably be interested in just articulating explicitly in a bylaw. I think the bit about, restricting or regulating short-term rentals is something you'll want to do. So I think that, and to the extent that, again, we had a version of an ADU bylaw, I've had Cheyenne kind of go through that and kind of take out all the things that look like they were in conflict with the new state law and add anything that kind of looked like, we'd be able to do under the state law. So similar to the site plan approval framework that we have, it's actually a lot more spare because the box that we're in is tighter. But that's something that if that's something that can get passed by around February, and I know that the select board talked about penciling in a February special town meeting, so there might be a period where we may not have a bylaw, but we'll be on track to have one, if we make it to that. But again, there's been an indication that the state is interested in issuing regulations. What those regulations are going to say, what kind of issues they're going to illuminate, is totally up in the air. So yeah, it's not an internal, and I think the sentiment, at least as I gather, is that we'll want to have a bylaw in place that allows us to put the types of parameters on it that we're allowed to.
Definitely.
Okay, so there's a little bit of pressure on that one. And then site plan approval is more of our deadline, a Milton Planning Board deadline?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things at work here. I think there's a general, sentiment among most folks here on the board that that we've needed to make some changes to our site plan approval, stipulations, irrespective of MBTA communities. But I think the other kind of pressure point is, we could potentially see more projects that trigger site plan approval, and we'll want to have favorable, provisions in place that we all agree on and want to see going forward. And so again, to the extent that there's pressure, it's, if we have to pass a MBTA communities bylaw, you'll probably want to do site plan review parallel to that, if not ahead of time. I can't imagine getting it done ahead of time, just with the way the schedule looks. But doing those two in tandem, with the recognition that we've got to do MBTA communities if that's the case, in order to make it more manageable. We're also amending site plan approval, so also kind of a deadline on that one, I guess. Whether you consider that to be internally or externally imposed is kind of up to you.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
And just for everyone's kind of knowledge, I did text with the town administrator. The setting that I've been trying to play with will kind of reset if we shut down the webinar and turn it back on. Given the number of attendees that we've got, I'm kind of loath to do that. I'm sure everyone is capable of getting back on, but I don't want to lose people. So Meredith, I don't think that it will affect any of the panelists or applicants' ability to share screen, to share materials.
Okay.
I think that's the most kind of relevant.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you think that's going to be a problem? So that,
and Nick doesn't think that it will be.
okay.
But if it
And
is,
let's move forward as is.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't want to lose all the folks who have gotten in. So.
All right. So thank you, everybody.
Great. All right. Thank you. So at this time, we can now move to item 4, our citizens speak. If anyone would like to speak to something that is not on the agenda, you will have an opportunity to speak. But if you would like to speak at this time, you can raise your hand and we will, Cheyenne and Tim will let you in. And let's see.
Not seeing any hands just yet.
Not yet, either am I. Let's see. Give it just a minute. Okay. So there will be an opportunity to speak when we get to items on the, they're also listed on the agenda. So I think at this time, we can now move to reopen the public hearing for 10 Bassett Street, site plan approval amendment, continued from October 10th. And we can welcome the team.
Yeah, can I ask the team to raise their hands and I'll bring you in as panelists?
And maybe we'll be able to see them. Hmm.
So we've got Mike, Amanda, and Amelia, Mike Mignosa. Is there anyone else that you wanted all to join you up here?
Can you
think-
unmute?
So I think that's everyone for the moment, anyway.
There's also Rich Hines raising his hand. I don't know. Is he part of your team, Mike?
No,
Um,
no, I think he's there to speak if he can later on.
Okay. All right. We'll keep you, Rich, noticed that you will like to speak at some point. So, all right. If you all would like to go ahead and I know you have a presentation that you have been working on.
That is correct, Madam Chair. And if I can make a brief opening statement, then I'll lead into the
That would be great.
people that want to make the presentation, if you don't mind.
That would be perfect.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to express my condolences from myself and from the McNosa family for the loss of Sean's family, and we're very sorry about that. I wanted to address some areas that have been modified or changed since the last couple of hearings that we've had. This is our third hearing. The hours of operation have been reduced by the applicant. Right now, what the applicant is talking about is on Sunday through Thursday, having the restaurant open from 3 to 9 p.m. Food service would stop at 9. All customers have to be out of the building by 10:30. And then on Friday and Saturday evenings, the food service would stop at 9:30 p.m. and all customers would need to be out of the building by 11 p.m. That's an adjustment that the applicant has done at the urgence of the possible tenant of the property. A modified seating and floor plan in the bar area in the enclosed area has been reduced to 24 seats. It's been reduced by 6 seats. There's a plan that has been submitted. It's a sketch of a plan showing what it would look like. This results in 75 dining table seats and 24 seats for the alleged bar seats where people will have meals as well. The available seats will be reduced by 20% as a result, bar seats that I'm talking about overall. The applicant, I would point out that the applicant has to be bound by the terms and requirements of the annual renewal of their liquor license and the annual renewal of the common victualer's license with the town of Milton. It's a process, as you know, that they have to go through every year. I want to address the access to the restaurant. There'll be multiple ways to gain access to the restaurant. There's an inside stairway and there's an elevator in addition to the outside staircase. So it's not just the outside staircase that would be used by the customers. The applicant takes the position that the property will be run as a restaurant and not necessarily as a bar at all. Food will be served and eaten at the bar area and at the table areas. The restaurant does not have much storage area, and the space where the bar would be located would be able to store items and supplies needed in the restaurant operations. I would also point out that an expert architect designed the layout with many years of experience designing restaurants, a fellow by the name of Steve Tedesco, and the applicants relied upon his knowledge. I want to emphasize that food has to be served with drinks. If a customer has 2 drinks, they're required to order a meal. Windows in the seating area on the second floor that's now been enclosed will not be left open after 7 p.m. to avoid any possible noise for the neighbors. The actual volume of any background noise or music will be minimal. The applicant has done tests on the enclosed area that indicate that noise levels heard outside the enclosed area in the enclosed seating area that would demonstrate this. Michael McNosa would like to speak after I'm done, and he'd like to indicate to you what he found. Now, we're not doing this with any great expertise, but he certainly did a test showing if the windows are shut, that the result would be very little noise would be gone outside and would not disturb neighbors. The parking lot has been redesigned to some degree, and the owner will close the back section of the lot at 8 p.m. every evening. Lights will be shut down on the Antwerp Street side of the property after 8 p.m. This is a large portion of the parking lot that we close to avoid noise and lights in that area, particularly near where residents live in the Antwerp Street area. There will also be security provided by the applicant in the parking lot until customers have left the premises and the parking areas. I would like to point out that the chef's table is an important area in which has been the restaurant area of the prior restaurant, The Plate. This could not be located in the enclosed area on the deck where the bar would be due to the available space area. The pizza oven that is thought to be put in the area where the plate was is a focal point for the restaurant design and functionality. This space is not large enough to house necessary equipment and to operate a full-service bar in that area. And I would point out that state-of-the-art ventilators and air-made systems will be installed by Marbella. The air-made commercial ventilation system that we've talked about before and we've explained, we think it's a good system. We think it will help. At this time, I'd like Michael McNosa, if possible, to talk briefly about what he examined when he put some noise in the seating area and tested what type of noise and how it went outside and how it could be picked up outside. If you wouldn't mind, if Michael could speak about that.
Yes, please. Welcome, Mike.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us again. So I don't know if you saw the video that I sent. We attached to all this other material that we sent to you guys, but I did an experiment with my daughter last week after we closed, and I have a Bose radio, and I turned the Bose radio up to 100, which is about as loud as it can go, which is pretty darn loud. So loud so that we'd have to yell at each other to actually communicate. So in that video, it shows her in that space. She actually did the shooting for me, the video shooting. She left the building, door closed behind her. You could tell how muted the sound was when she left. She went in front of the building, and as she was in front of the building, I opened the windows so you could see or hear how loud it was when the windows were open, and then I very slowly closed the windows so you could hear how muted or not hear much of anything actually after I closed the windows. So pretty impressive actually as far as the noise reducing or noise cancellation that the new addition provides with the new windows and whatnot. So if you get a chance, if you haven't listened to it already, I invite you to do so. It's pretty impressive actually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, at this time, I would ask that the ladies, Amanda Albee and Amelia Browning, join in with your permission, and they're going to make a presentation with some slides. I'm not sure if they can do it given the circumstances, but they certainly can explain what the mission would be of the Marbella restaurant and what would be envisioned would result if they're allowed to occupy the premises. Thank you.
Great. Thank you and welcome. And I think we can share that presentation. Tim, if you could pull that up, or Cheyenne.
Jen, are you able to do like a full screen view of that? Here, no,
Yep.
that's a little bit better. Yeah.
Okay. Feel free to start and go ahead.
Amanda?
Yeah. She may be still muted.
Yep, she must be.
Let's see.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share this with you guys. I have a quick question. Would you mind if we did the slideshow and shared our screen so we could control the slides like with what we're saying?
Absolutely. Please do that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
That should be all set for you.
All right. Are you guys able to see that?
Yep.
All right. Beautiful. All right. So my name is Amanda Albee, and I'm here also with my colleague Amelia Browning, and also Vance Welch is present as well with us. We're a part of the team that would be operating Marbella, which we would aim to be a high-end Mediterranean restaurant. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to address your concerns. In addition to addressing concerns, we want to paint a picture of how a full-service restaurant can strategically target a specific audience, positively contributing to our community's culinary landscape and economy. 10 Bassett Street has housed several operations, all of which were cherished by the community. Our business model encompasses market needs, accounting sense, overall vision of the shopping center, and neighborhood demand. We are proposing something new and innovative in this space that is all-encompassing. We will be using data from Abbey Park as the bar seating in question is the same in size. We kindly ask that you hold off any questions until the end of the presentation so we can ensure that we cover all material clearly. At Marbella, our mission is to cultivate a vibrant community hub where friends, families, and neighbors come together to savor delicious, locally sourced food. We believe that mealtime should be fun and engaging, which is why we offer a vibrant menu filled with delicious, nutritious options that kids love and parents can feel good about. Our playful atmosphere is designed to spark imagination and foster connections, making every visit a delightful adventure. Committed to exceptional service and community engagement, we strive to be the go-to destination where families can gather, create lasting memories, and enjoy quality time together, one delicious bite at a time.
We look forward to collaborating with the Fruit Center and the other existing businesses in the marketplace. Our vision is to establish a space that not only features a diverse and nutritious menu that caters to all age groups, but also emphasizes a warm, inviting atmosphere where families can gather, celebrate, and create lasting memories. We plan to incorporate family-friendly amenities such as play areas for children, kid-centric menus, and seating arrangements that promote interaction and comfort among family members. Events that we are excited about offering include daytime events for kids called the Kids Corner, where we have activities such as story time, cooking classes, arts and crafts, fashion shows with the Q, wine dinners, cooking classes, shopping events, paint nights, and other crafts. Community engagement through these partnerships with other businesses, local schools, and local events can enhance loyalty and brand recognition. By hosting themed events and offering family specials, this restaurant can create a loyal following that views the establishment not just as a place to eat, but a hub of community life. Just as important as what we will be is what we will not be. We will not be a sports bar, will not be a place where people go to drink but not eat, both for legal licensing reasons and also because that's just not our vision. As a high-end restaurant, we'll be cultivating an atmosphere where families, couples, and friends can gather for conversation over a fine meal. Noise and cheering would spoil that atmosphere. Yes, there will be bar seating, but similar to Abbey Park and Novara, the bar seating will be a place for single people to eat without the stigma of sitting alone at a table, or a place for looking for a more casual social dining experience, or to wait while their table is being prepared, or for the rest of their party to arrive. On this next slide, we're going to discuss our proposed hours of operation, which we have altered. Sunday through Thursday, our last dinner seating will be at 8:30, lights out by 10:30. Friday and Saturday, last seating at 9, lights out by 11 p.m. These analytics from our Open Table reservation system at Abbey Park show the average turn times on a weekend night for parties of all sizes. In other words, how long a party will sit to enjoy their meal. So you might ask that if the business is going to naturally die down earlier, why would we propose later hours? Just note that Abbey Park has very few customers that arrive to be seated after 8:30 or stay after 10:30 p.m., but it's important to make customers feel welcome and not feel as though they'll be rushed out before they're ready to leave. The point being, Marbella will be very quiet after 9:30 based on our experience at Abbey Park.
We appreciate your commitment to the community and your efforts to balance the needs of residents and local businesses. We understand that such decisions are made with the best intentions. However, we would like to express our concerns regarding altering the hours of operation. Our current proposed hours of operation are designed to serve the diverse needs of our patrons and the community at large. Reducing these hours may significantly impact our business, including financial viability. Adjusting the hours to an earlier close time could lead to decreased revenue, making it challenging to cover operational costs and staff salaries. Our employees rely on the volume of customers during the current hours for their livelihoods. Community demand. We have observed a consistent demand for our services during the hours in question. Many of our regular customers appreciate our dinner offerings, which cater to patrons seeking dining options after their workday ends. Job losses. Limitations on operating hours could result in reduced shifts for staff, jeopardizing their employment and the availability of jobs within the community. As a community, we are anticipating the loss of the Franklin Street lot and the impact that it will have on our existing operations. This new business venture will provide job security for our existing staff, dozens of which are residents of Milton. We are committed to being a positive contributor to the neighborhood and would welcome a dialogue on how we can address any concerns the board may have regarding noise, traffic, or other community issues. Perhaps a compromise could be reached that allows us to maintain our current hours while addressing any specific concerns. It's important to remember that we are building a business that is family-centered. We anticipate seeing little business enter the building after 7 p.m. We have shared data from Abbey Park's reservation system and Google that show the flow of business. It's not a fluke that both restaurants are not late-night bar scenes. Our management team works diligently to create an atmosphere that draws in families and people of all ages. We have policies in place in both restaurants, and our staff are tips certified to ensure proper handling of alcohol. The audience that we are targeting are not rowdy bar goers looking for a party. The operation is going to organically empty out at an early hour, and we are targeting families. Oops. Pause that for 1 second. Some concerns that have been raised are noise coming from the proposed veranda room when the windows are open, so we've agreed to close the windows at 7 p.m., hold trash indoors until the morning, and close off the back parking lot at 8 p.m. This slide that I'm about to play is just showing that even though there were some concerns about deliveries being made at 9 p.m., that our restaurants don't receive deliveries in the evening time. So when you see a delivery truck parked in front of Abbey Parks, not necessarily mean it's for Abbey. And this just shows that. Starbucks is actually the location that receives their deliveries in the evening just because it works with their flow of business. And all of this information that we're sharing is to just hopefully address the concerns that the abutters had and that we're not going to add any headaches to their day-to-day. Another fun fact that we're sharing when it comes to the concerns with the windows is that on average, Massachusetts experiences around 60 to 70 days per year with temperatures between 65 and 75 degrees with no rain. You can't have windows open in a restaurant operation unless they fall within this temperature range because it will alter inside too drastically if it's too cold or if it's too hot. This here are Google Analytics that show some neighboring restaurants that people are probably familiar with that are more bar driven. You can see Alba on 53 on a Saturday night, which is highlighted here, that they're busy all the way up until 12 a.m. Lincoln Tavern well past 12 a.m. and Lucy's up until 12 a.m. And then if we toggle over here to Abbey Park, which again is the same size as the bar that we're proposing for Marbella, on a Friday night, nothing much going on after 9 o'clock. We also shared with you our open table scheduling system that shows Friday night, which is here, that the peak times are between 6 o'clock and 7:30, 7:45, and then nothing much after that. It just organically empties out. Just gonna pause this for one moment because I would like to share the volume with you guys on this one. So it just takes one additional step for me to do that. 1 second. Just wanted to paint a picture of the level of noise right outside of Abbey Park. You see not much going on, not a lot of noise other than the main road. In the restaurant, roughly a full bar. And it is, as you can see, Saturday, October 12th. And it is 7:37 p.m. See the type of clientele that we draw. Thank you for your patience.
So as we move on to our proposed restaurant floor plan, it's important to note that Marbella was designed by Steve Tedisco, an expert restaurant architect with decades of experience, based on the very specific floor plan of the site, the location of the utilities, floor drains, existing kitchen and shared storage area, operational and business needs, as well as aesthetic concerns. Mr. Tedisco would tell you, as he's told us, that this is the way the restaurant floor plan needs to be. The kitchen, dishwashing station, cold storage, and dry storage can't go anywhere other than where they are on the plan. The open kitchen with an adjacent chef's table, which is central to the Marbella concept, cannot be placed anywhere else and uses so much of the existing former restaurant space that there's simply no place to put the bar seating other than in the new space. Moreover, the new bar seating needs to be in that new space for accessibility, traffic flow, and staff communication issues. This was all carefully planned by an expert in restaurant design, taking into account the physical limitations of the space and the existing infrastructure, including the unusual element of common hallway bisecting the two restaurant areas. It can't practically be changed, as the architect also took into consideration very real financial considerations, such as the availability of bar seating for overflow when our tables are full and the appropriate ratio of bar seating to table seating in a contemporary restaurant. The chef's table here is designed to be a fully functional extension of the kitchen, both a workspace and a place for guests to gather for an immersive dining experience. This is an effective and creative way to utilize this space, maximizing both the guest experience and our takeout hub here for quick service, since the space was not large enough to function as the restaurant's bar due to lack of space for refrigeration, storage, and equipment. The separate entrance and exit on the veranda side here is an important safety consideration, ensuring a secondary exit route in case of emergencies. Guests who enter the restaurant here will be greeted by signs directing them to the host, who will have a direct view of this entry from across the open hallway. The bartender and servers will also be responsible for taking ownership of the guest experience by guiding them to seats at the bar or to the host for seating at a table. As you can see from this pie chart, Marbella is not really a big bar. We have 24 bar seats slated as opposed to the 75 dining seats. The bar is not just a space for serving alcoholic beverages. It plays a pivotal role in enhancing the overall dining experience and contributes significantly to a restaurant's success. Here are some key points to consider. Enhanced customer experience. A bar area creates a relaxed and inviting atmosphere where patrons can unwind before or after a meal. It encourages social interaction and can serve as a gathering spot for friends, families, and coworkers, enhancing their overall experience. Supporting local producers. By featuring and collaborating with local producers, the restaurant can support our local economy and promote community engagement. This not only builds goodwill, but can also attract customers who prioritize these local products. And cultural appeal. Many modern dining experiences and family attractions emphasize the combination of food and drink. A dedicated bar with knowledgeable staff can elevate the dining experience through expertly paired drinks, enhancing the culinary offerings and catering to food enthusiasts. Family time these days is a rarity. It's increasingly common for family and neighborhood attractions to offer something that appeals to everyone in the family, including a full-service bar. Some examples of family-oriented business operating full-service bars are bowling alleys, arcades, movie theaters, and theme parks. The list goes on. The inclusion of a bar in a full-service restaurant is integral to creating a dynamic dining environment that promotes customer satisfaction and community engagement. Some concerns that have been raised about the bar: the shared hallway. It's important to be mindful, though, of how a restaurant operates. Guests don't wander around aimlessly. When you arrive at a restaurant, you check in, after which you're brought to a table. In the effort to prevent guests walking the hallway with drinks, we plan to post signage that prohibits guests from crossing the hallway with beverage in hand. But in reality, it just doesn't really happen where people will walk around a dining room with a beverage in hand, because we're not a nightclub. The size of the bar. The dimensions of the bar itself are crucial to our plans due to the lack of cold storage in the existing restaurant space. The layout of the bar is based upon the dimensions that can fit refrigeration equipment and shelving that will store white wine, bottled beer, chilled glasses, ice bins, hand sinks, dishwasher, and kegs. Most full-service restaurants have walk-in coolers that are dedicated to the storage of these products. The existing restaurant space does not have this refrigeration. The counter space that exists in the current restaurant space is not big enough to fit the equipment necessary to operate a full-service bar. The TVs in the bar area. These will serve as a focal point for entertainment, drawing patrons in and encouraging them to stay longer. Whether showcasing live sports events, news, or popular shows, they can create a communal and lively environment where guests feel more connected to one another and to the action on screen. This sense of community can lead to increased customer loyalty and repeat visits. By no means does having a few TVs equate to potentially becoming a sports bar. In order for an operation to become a sports bar, many additional places would need to be in place. The number of TVs is important, the ambiance, the type of food, having volume on during the games, and even the staff's uniforms. As this video here, during a Patriots game, Sunday afternoon, as you can see, there's people at the bar. They're all eating, they're enjoying the game. Very minimal noise, very relaxing atmosphere, just everybody hanging out on a Sunday afternoon.
This here is Toast Analytics. This is our POS system in which we ring in all of our orders. In the orange is Abbey Park, and in the purplish blue are other restaurants in 5 neighboring towns. On the left, you see our food sales are relatively a lot higher than other restaurants. And on the right, you can see that our bar sales are a lot lower than other restaurants that are comparable to us. And that's analytics that show over the course of a month. So again, just really driving home the fact that we're more of a food-driven business. In conclusion, we have redesigned the space to the extent that is possible with acoustic tiles for noise reduction. We have agreed to guarantee closure of the windows by 7 p.m. We have agreed to close the Antwerp Street entrance and back lot at 8 p.m. and ensure staff park only facing Bassett Street. The parking lot will be patrolled. We have reduced our proposed operating hours to Sunday through Thursday, close at 10:30. That means everyone out, lights off. And Friday through Saturday, 11 p.m. We have reduced bar seating by 20% and replaced it with additional dining room seating. It's important to remember that our business must renew licensure annually. And if this restaurant is truly problematic, it would become ineligible for renewal.
Thank you, Amanda.
Well, oh, I'm almost done. So sorry.
Okay.
2 more minutes.
All right.
Thank you for your time and consideration. As Mr. Modestino said at the beginning, the Fruit Center has made significant changes to its proposal in its response to concerns raised by the board and abutters. They have amended the proposal by reducing the proposed hours and addressing parking, traffic noise, and lighting concerns. I think everyone in the room knows what a good neighbor and cooperative citizen that the Fruit Center has been over the decades, and how lucky the town is to have such a wonderful market, employer, and host to a pharmacy and locally owned shops. East Milton Square and the surrounding areas would be poor without them. I'd like to think that Abbey Park and Navarra have a similar reputation. Certainly that has been the experience of Amelia and I. Working with Vance Welch, who started out Java Joe's many, many years ago, I can attest to the fact that we run a tight ship. Anytime a neighbor or customer or employee has concerns, we do everything in our power to address it. We know that our liquor and common victualler licenses are up for renewal every year, and that if we don't do our best, then we could be out of business. But that's not what drives us to do our best. Vance, Amelia, and I have chosen to be in the service industry. We do it because it's what makes us happy in our jobs and makes us look forward to going to work the next day, is making other people happy. Getting a thank you and the meal and the service were wonderful. Makes us feel good. There aren't a lot of jobs where you get that kind of positive feedback on a daily basis. Sure, some people will always complain, but that just inspires you to do better. And it's not just the customers. As a service professional, if a neighbor has a complaint, I will do my best to resolve it, whether they are a customer or not. This is how we operate at Abbey Park in Navarre, and I am proud to say that we do not have any neighbors who object to our operation. In conclusion, I understand why some residents might fear that Marbella could adversely affect their quality of life. I hope this board appreciates that the Fruit Center has been very responsive to the issues that have been made, and that Marbella is similarly focused on addressing the concerns of the abutters, and that both parties will continue, as they have been, to be responsible citizens. I would just like to point out that these very same concerns, traffic noise and etc., were raised when Abbey Park sought a permit and when Navarra did. Those permits were granted and those restaurants opened. I don't presume to speak for the entire town, but based on my experience, every resident that I have spoken to is glad that they are here, including the abutters. Thank you so much for allowing us the time to share our presentation with you.
Thank you, Amanda and Amelia. That's great. I think what we should do now, since I think there's some folks maybe who would like to speak, I know there was one hand up, give a certain amount of time and then hear from the board. Would that be okay with the board members if we just let some of the residents speak to this? proposal?
Yeah, no problem.
Problem.
Meredith,
Yes.
did you have a amount of time that you wanted to devote to public comment and then to board comment so that we have adequate time for the second agenda item, which we didn't have
Yeah.
time for at our last
Yeah,
meeting?
we need to get to that. So I was going to say, 15 minutes, if we could hear from the residents, give them 15 minutes, and then the board, we can go to the board.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks.
That sound good? Okay. Okay, so if you are interested in speaking, I know there's quite a few hands up. Let's go to Rich Hines. He had his hand up first, and invite Rich to join us. And if you could state your name and your address for the record. And I think if we have a few people, we just want to keep our comments as brief as possible. And you're still muted, Rich?
I've been clicking the ask to unmute button, but maybe we'll move on and Rich,
Okay.
if you're still with us, you can raise your hand and get back to the back.
Great. It looks like Hank Bell is next. Right, Hank?
Did we lose Hank as well?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Hank Bell. I live at 60 Sassamon Street Avenue in Milton, Massachusetts. I'm a former warrant committee member. I was a co-member with Cheryl Tagayas and Mike Zulis. I also was on the board, the warrant committee board, when we started this experiment of having restaurants come into our community. For those of you who weren't there at that time, there were a lot of concerns about how that business was going to work in East Milton. And I think we all can agree that it's been pretty successful. And it also helped us as a community because, as you know, we had a limited tax base there back then. And we have a limited tax base as a town in general. And I believe the establishments have helped out with those challenges we've had. And they run an honest and clean business. Again, it was an experiment. We weren't sure how it was going to work, and it was successful. And on top of that, this Vance and his team have been a huge supporter of the town. I was also a member of the Milton Foundation for Education. And every time the community went to Vance and his organization for support, they were there. And I think, in my opinion, he's been a good community servant to the community and a good restaurant owner and a good supporter of our town. So that's what I like to say. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Hank. And I think Rich Hines is back now, and if we can let him in, I think he was next. If you could unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome, Rich.
Hello?
Yes, hi.
Hey, sorry about that. I run the Milton Basketball League, and we have tryouts now, so I have my earbuds in, and trying to do two things at once here. So my name is Rich Hines. I live at 1 Paradise Road in Milton. The reason I'm calling into this is because my mother lives at 20 Church Street in Milton, and she is the direct abutter to Navarro Restaurant. So I was involved back, I think it was about 10 years ago, in the planning board meetings with Vance and his ownership group and Bob Falcone and the board at the time on the development of the old movie theater to become a restaurant. And my elderly parents, my father has since passed. My elderly parents both lived at 20 Church Street. My mother still lives there to this day. We're literally the different abutters. They live in the White House right next to the parking lot. So we had concerns, obviously, back in the 80s, there was an active movie theater. There'd be lots of people walking around the streets and whatnot. And, as this thing was being developed, we wanted to make sure it was going to be done the right way. It wasn't necessarily that we were opposed to it, but it was we need this to be done the right way, and we need to know that if there's any type of issues that arise after it gets approved, that the people in charge would work with us to make any corrections or take any actions that need to be taken in case issues arose. So, we went through the process. There was a lot of neighbors involved. I know some neighbors on Church Street were opposed to it. Approved, and I have to say, like Vance and some of the other guys, Von Driscoll, Mark Morris, Bob Falcone still reaches out on occasion, have been excellent neighbors at Novara to my mother at 20 Church Street. It hasn't been perfect. There's been a few issues here and there. I make a couple phone calls. The issues are taken care of as soon as humanly possible. If I ever walk into Novara, they right up to me. How's your mother doing? Is there anything we can do for your mother? Is there any issues? They have terrific neighbors. The experience has been better than we ever thought it would be. The actual property, like my parents' property, I feel like the value has increased around our home because the East Milton Square with these two restaurants, it definitely has a nicer feel than it did maybe going back 15 years ago. There were two abandoned houses next to my parents' house that were raised, and they put the parking lot in, but they made it a very attractive space. So I'm just calling it, like, I do not know the inner workings of the plans, the designs, all those things. I just know that over the years, the Novara restaurant, even Abbey Park's less than 100 yards away from my mother's house. She backs up to the old Bay Bank, the Starbucks parking lot there. There's been really no issues. And, I kind of want to speak to those neighbors on Antwerp Street, Franklin Road. Like, they have concerns, I'm confident that Vance ownership group would be there to alleviate any concerns they would have, any issues, just like they've done with my mother. I'm sure the other neighbors on Church Street.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate it.
And as far as the noise
wanna...
goes, so the last thing I'm going to say is the noise. They have the outdoor patio right there. In all the years, my mother's heard the noise once, and that was a group photo where the photographer was asking the group to everyone yell and cheer, and that was it. That was the only time she ever heard it. It's a nice, quiet space outdoors. It's not loud music. It's just quiet, people talking and eating, and that's it. So I just wanted to say my piece, throw my support behind this group, and I will let you go. All right.
Okay.
Yes.
The next, Tim, are you seeing the next one? Is the phone number 617 ending in 171? They're muted.
I've hit the ask to unmute button.
Okay. There, yep.
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Hi, this is Bob Kelly. Thanks. Keep it brief. I live at 65 Franklin Street. I'm an abutter to this proposal, and I also happen to be a board member of the East Milton Neighborhood Association. Firstly, the fact that Mr. McNosa appears to be heavily involved, that's a big plus. I have been speaking with many neighbors since the last hearing, and the major issues, the top two issues are the hours of operation and the smells. So I'd like we'd all like more information exactly how what equipment is going to be purchased to mitigate smells, and the hours. There's been mentioned tonight that they have been slightly tweaked, but everyone I've talked to, 10:30 and 11 o'clock, that's just still a little too late for everyone I've spoken to. Recognizing that there's about 25 houses on various streets that, directly abut this, the fruit center. There was past past mention that the restaurant slash bar will have no impact on the neighborhood, and I don't think that's accurate. Just based on everybody's common sense, there's going to be more deliveries, more trucks, more noise. There's going to be more parking needed for staff. Going to be more smells. There's already, pretty pungent smells from the two existing restaurants in the square now, and from the preparation that occurs at the fruit center. Furthermore, the fact of the matter is there's going to be more cars on our streets with this proposed restaurant slash bar. There's going to be more cars with people who have just had a couple of drinks. So, the square is not what it was 15 years ago. And, my point is none of these issues make the neighborhood better. Also, there's been no compelling evidence offered why this venture has to be a 7-night per week operation. The fact of the matter is there's no precedence in Milton for a bar to be operating 7 nights a week in a neighborhood that's exclusively zoned residential. So I think I would ask the board to, consider that in your deliberations. And thank you for hearing everybody.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, Maureen Finn, looks like she's next. And you just muted yourself, if you could just unmute.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
This is not Maureen Finn. This is Rosemary Foley, and I live at 42 Franklin Street. I just wanted to add, that Abby and Novara have been good neighbors, and I would like to keep it that way, as it has been the fruit center. But Michael, the gentleman that spoke earlier tonight, mentioned that there's a new ventilation system that you're thinking about that you think will work. So I'm curious to hear have you checked references? Do you know that it will work? Because today the fruit center, for Mike McNosa, I email him almost every day stating that the ventilation system at the fruit center is just not working well at all. He did mention he had a kitchen consultant coming in, and I'm curious to see where that goes. So I hope that the ventilation will be fixed and it won't matter for the new restaurant coming in. I also just want to be sure, and I think Bob just mentioned this, that when Abby and Novara came in, you were great neighbors to be sure that nobody was going to be parking on Franklin Street. I hope that remains the same as this new restaurant comes in, because we live in Milton, no disrespect to Dorchester, but, I don't live in Dorchester where everybody parks on the streets. So I hope that remains the same, and that there'll be no parking on Franklin Street. Right now, it's a speedway, and we really should be making it a one-way street or putting speed bumps on our street. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents there. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rosemary. Okay, and next, Bob and Mary.
Yeah, hi, this is
You might have a cell phone close to your computer.
Hi, this is Bob Ranton and 54 Franklin Street. I've dealt with Mike over the years. Fruit Center's been a good neighbor to us. First of all, I'd like to comment on the photo that was taken on a Saturday night at 7:30 in East Milton Square. I've been here for over 30 years. I've never saw not one person outside East Milton Square. So I thought that was a little
Made up.
I forget the word that I wanted to use. Anyways, whatever goes in over at the fruit center above, I think the hours of operation need to be trimmed back. It is a residential area. I would like to keep it that way. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. Okay. And we'll take one more, just a last, we have Carol Joyce Harrington. And then we'll go
Hi,
to the board.
can you hear
Yes,
me?
welcome. Yes.
Okay, great. This is Carol Joyce Harrington at 41 Franklin Street, and a lot of the folks in the neighborhood have already spoken. Still concerns about the operating hours. They're too long. The two commercial kitchens, one is in the fruit center, one will be with Marbella, and I don't know what an air-made ventilation system is. We were all expecting something that had some teeth in it, because the smells, to quote somebody, could wake the dead at 6:30 in the morning, even just from the commercial kitchen. And it's constant. So we'd like to find out before this restaurant goes in, if there is something that will temper down those smells altogether, outside of the restaurant. And then if the restaurant's got a smell going 7 days a week, because that's the time they'll be operating, all hours of the day, it's not going to help. I appreciated Marbella's presentation, but to throw in, Alba, the Lincoln, and Lucy's, they're all in commercial areas. They're not in residence. This particular project is in a residential area, and that should not be forgotten. It would set precedent for the rest of the town of Milton. Another business that may be in a residential zone can all of a sudden put in pizza ovens. And I don't think that would be pretty much accepted by the rest of the town either. And the final question I had on the lighting, in the parking lot, you have 3 or 4 residents that back up on Franklin Street. Is the lighting that's going off at 8 o'clock also the lighting for the municipal lot? Because there are children going to bed, Monday through Friday, Saturday and Sundays too, but I mean schooling age children. And the lighting does shine into those 4 homes. So I think that's about all I had, because most folks that spoke had already touched on everything else. Thank you very much. And thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Okay. All right. Now, questions from the board or comments? And yes, Cheryl, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your comments, and to Amanda and Amelia for the presentation. I think we've heard kind of on a regular basis some consistent concerns, and noise, hours, and odors in particular. On the noise side, I appreciate the video that was taken, but there are other ways to measure noise and to plan for mitigating noise. And so, that we could request an acoustic consultant be engaged and take some readings for what the ambient noise is currently. And then we could set a baseline noise level that couldn't be exceeded and which could be measured. I think measurable conditions are the best way to go. If that's if this is a decision that we end up making, we want to have conditions that have real ways to be ascertain whether they're being complied with. There was also a reference to acoustic tiles being installed. There's no information about where the acoustic tiles are, how they're being designed to address noise levels. I think acoustic consultant could also help with that. It was mentioned in the presentation, again, thinking of noise, that the second stair was a secondary exit and an emergency route, which brings me back to the whole question of when it was applied for, and why, but we are somewhat past that. But what I would say is, if it's really deemed as a secondary exit, then it could be an exit only, in which case the door wouldn't be opening and closing on a regular basis, which would negate the sound dampening that the windows provide. If the door were open and closed on a regular basis, let's say for takeout or for other things, the noise would still be coming through. So that's something that we could consider. On the odor control side, I think I've asked for additional information, which Mike Munoz provided some, but I do think it needs to come from an expert in the field. And I would ask that a kitchen consultant really be retained. Maybe it's a mechanical engineer to provide a robust recommendation for both this kitchen and for the Fruit Center kitchen. As far as some of the traffic impacts, it was mentioned that there was a takeout hub. I'd like to understand what percent of the business is anticipated to be takeout, so we could understand how much coming and going there will be for that purpose. And then on the licensing renewal, it was mentioned that that has to be renewed every year, and that if they weren't operating according to their permits, that they were at risk. And since both Navarra and Abbey Park have been operating for some time, and I know that there have been some concerns about operations such as loading, has anything ever changed as a result of the annual renewal process? Has there been any change in any operations and loading programs and in hours, for example, to address any concerns raised by neighbors? So those are my comments and questions for tonight.
Great. Jim or Maggie?
Sure, I'll go if you don't mind, Jim.
No, go ahead.
So I'll just go kind of just down questions or comments I have from the presentation. So I believe you said there's going to be 24 bar seating and 75 table seating. And I did look at the permit for Steel and Rye, and according to them, they have a 15 bar seating. And so I think they have done a great job with the experience of a more casual seating arrangement at the bar. So if they're successful there, I would assume that fewer seating at a bar at your location would be just as successful. So I would like to see the bar size reduced. You also commented about, at a restaurant, that when the guests are seated, they don't walk around. And I agree with that, but people who go to bars do walk around. That's really why people go to bars, is to interact with other people. So I do think having a big bar space is going to encourage more people walking around than you think. And again, in your presentation, you said the TV will have news on and it's going to support community engagement. I'm not really sure if news these days actually promotes community engagement. It seems to be promoting community divisiveness. So I wouldn't recommend putting any news on. And traffic was a concern when the restaurants were open, years ago. And I really think many people would argue that those concerns actually have come true. I'm not in East Milton on a regular basis, daily basis, but I am in East Milton pretty frequently. And I always see people double parked. I always see trucks parking in no trucking, the no loading zones. So I really do think it's a concern. And I do think their fears have come true. And again, I don't live there, but I just see it when I'm just driving through and I, get stuck behind, especially Uber drivers. They're the worst. Let's see. My question was about the smells of the commercial kitchen. I've reviewed your permits pretty closely, but I may have missed it. So I'm wondering, what year did you get approval to put that commercial kitchen in? And as part of that approval, what was the mitigation condition to offset the smells? Because I didn't really see that in the permit history. And also, just to wrap up, I was disappointed this week that there was not a redesign to the space. I think, we commented at our last meeting that we support a bar, we support a restaurant, we support the business, we support the family, but we really wanted to see the bar put at the back. And I understand the finances of business. For those women who could be new tonight, I have my own business in town. I operate a business in a residential district. And sometimes you have to make sacrifices that do affect your bottom line if you want to operate a business. And to be quite frank, nobody cared about my bottom line with all the things that I had to do to allow me to continue my business, which was in business for 50 years. So I am very, very disappointed that there was not a redesign to the space. And I really do think the hours should be reduced, because I think it is a real fear that if we do allow a bar restaurant in a residential district, I think we are setting a precedent. Again, personally, my business is in a residential district, and I would love the opportunity to expand my business. I would love the opportunity to invite a Trillium or a Cisco Brewery to my business and expand my offerings to help offset my seasonal business. So I do think we have to be very careful because we are setting a precedent, and I know that people like myself would take advantage of it. So I think we have to be very careful. That's all I have for now.
Thanks, Maggie. And Jim, did you want to
I did, and I do.
make a few comments? Okay.
And I appreciate the presentation from Amanda and Amelia. That took a lot of time. And all the information that's come to us from residents and abutters. I mean, I'm counting up over 30 letters, citizen speak, people that have come and let us know how they feel about this. And I'm looking at about 18 that are just in support and love the idea, and 14 that have some pretty serious concerns or are almost opposed to it. So we got to strike a balance. And in looking at the video that Amanda and Amelia shot outside of Abbey Park, at 7:30 and then inside, at 7:30, the restaurant was hopping. I mean, the bar was almost full. The tables were almost full. I mean, I think, and it's a good thing, that Marbella is going to do more business than they think, and I think they're going to do more business later. Which brings me back to my original concern of noise and impact on the abutters. And I mean, Cheryl brought up a good point with the stairs. You know, I was under the impression that those stairs were just a convenience, not a egress or a code requirement. And I think that's the case. And if that is the case, I would like to see those stairs, you know, closed at 8:30. So there's no one coming in and out of there. And I think the more people that leave the establishment later at night through the center staircase down through the fruit center, it just keeps more noise inside for a longer period of time. So by the time they get outside into the parking lot, it's just less impact on the abutters. Because looking at it, you know, I look at the floor space and basically it's 50-50 bar restaurant. I understand that it's 25% seating in the bar and 75 in the restaurant, but the floor space sort of breakout just screams bar to me. And that's okay. You know, Milton has a great clientele. I'm not expecting, you know, fights in the parking lot and all sorts of crazy stuff, but it just, more emphasis on a bar brings everything that liquor late at night brings, which is noise and, you know, maybe a little bit of yelling in the parking lot, or maybe not, but the abutters to the fruit center are tolerating a ton of expansion since 1984. And, you know, this might be the one that kind of, I'm not going to say breaks them, but they just may have had enough. I hope there's a way that we as a board can condition the maintenance of the ventilation system, because that's a biggie. And I do hear the residents that, you know, we have to scale back the hours. I mean, I would like to see a hard close at 10. However, last call works out, that's great, but 10 o'clock, everyone's out. Those are my thoughts right now. Let me just check my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, I think I'm good for now. Thank you.
Meredith?
Wait. Yes, good.
Sorry, it's Cheryl. I just wanted to add one more thing that I had missed in my notes. In the presentation, there was mention of local producers in terms of supporting local business. And I don't know that that was included in the list of vendors that we received previously. And so if appropriate, I'd like that list of vendors updated, and, you know, what kind of local produce and local producers are we talking about? So thank you.
Right. Thank you.
And the other thing I wanted to mention, Meredith, when I was looking at the parking plan, I noticed in the municipal lot, it on the plan, it referenced another property owner called Greenspan Property. And, you know, in my knowledge, I always assumed all these years it was a municipal lot, because there's a sign that says municipal lot. But really, the town of Milton does not own that. It is owned by a separate property owner who owns Ruger's Bagel, sort of up to Melly's. And the town has an agreement with that property owner to use it. And I did reach out to the town administrator's office to see what the parking agreement says and what the terms of the agreement are. And I was a little surprised that the agreement was originally drafted in 1996, and the agreement says it's effective for a term of 3 years. And when asked if I could have an updated renegotiated parking agreement, I was told there was not one. So, and I know this doesn't really necessarily affect the Milton Marketplace, because they do have 190 spaces of their own, and I'm not quite as concerned about parking there because they do a phenomenal job with the parking. But I just wanted to make it known that the town of Milton does not own that space. And my fear is, with all the development that's coming, there could be a time when the property owner decides not to let the town of Milton use it. So we just have to remember that parking may not always be available for public use.
Great. Thank you, Maggie. That's an excellent point. So I just wanted to say, I really do appreciate the amenities of having Abbey Park and Novara and the Milton Marketplace. I think they've served the town very well. I'm grateful for, for Mr. Mignosa and Mr. Welch, everything that you've done for the community. It doesn't go unnoticed. However, the fruit center, the marketplace, is in a residential zone. This is an extreme change of use from the previous restaurants that were there, which were daytime, breakfast, lunch, closing early. This is a evening, very different concept, and certainly has a very large bar. East Milton is already densely populated. The residents are, really already overburdened by vehicle traffic, and we haven't even seen the 2 new large housing developments go in yet. I think this is precedent setting to put a bar such as this in a residential neighborhood, and really has the potential to really not only affect the current businesses, the Nutshell and the Q, they will be hurt by not having daytime traffic the way the lighter fare and the plate brought the businesses in. It will also have the potential to affect the neighbors. And already they are negatively impacted, and the fruit center, the Milton Marketplace, does not have a permit for cooking at this time, but yet they have a commercial kitchen. So I think that does need to be addressed. Saying that this will serve, families and, children can come in during the daytime. There's only 10 tables in the restaurant area. It's a very small, only 10 tables. That is not serving really a large number of people to come in for a lunch business. I don't see, parents, grandparents, and families, coming for a $30 entree for lunchtime. It's a fabulous menu. I actually love the concept, but I'm really concerned about this particular concept in this particular location. I think when I have looked, now knowing what you are asking for and what has changed, what has evolved with the marketplace, I think at this point, I think it is beyond the planning board to really be able to make a decision until we have heard how the ZBA will rule on this. I don't know if you've started that process yet, but you really need to go and have your special permit amended and to allow for this type of use, because this is extreme change of use in a residential neighborhood. And I love and I want to support a restaurant there. I'm really concerned about the overall impact to this residential neighborhood and precedent setting. So I think at this time, I don't know, Mr. Modestino, if you have had a conversation yet with the Zoning Board of Appeals?
I have not.
Okay. So we probably should have started this process even earlier. What I'd like to do is have a motion to move this public hearing. But I think you need to have a real conversation with the many changes that have occurred. I think you need to go back, look at the permit that you have, look at what is required under that permit, and see everything that is changed, because this is another extreme change, and really was not the intent of allowing a marketplace, allowing a commercial operation in a residential neighborhood. It started off as being a small cafe with boutique shops and a marketplace. This is a dramatic change, and I don't think the neighbors should have to defend themselves when they bought in a residential neighborhood. I feel like there's a process for this, and it's going through the ZBA, and I think then we can have our a real vote on a site plan approval and a real discussion once we know what will be allowed. And it's only respectful to the ZBA to let them know what is being asked and what is the current operations are on the site. So I don't know how the other members feel about that. I know, Tim, you would actually called that out at the very first public hearing, saying, where are you? Where is the applicant in discussion with the ZBA? And I think this is beyond just site plan approval at this point. Tim, do you want to maybe add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, having a clear understanding of where this proposal fits in the context of the numerous variances that have been issued to the numerous amendments that have been issued to the original variance that allowed the fruit center. I mean, I shared with you all almost 24 different decisions. Some of them approved, some of them not approved, but there are a lot of every aspect of this property, from kind of the physical structure to the hours of operation for some of the different users of the space have been amended over the years, and without a really clear, and it could be the case, and I'm not discounting the possibility that the hours being proposed and the use being proposed is consistent with sort of the latest agglomeration of amendments, and sort of the present state of permitting for this property. But I think we need to know that. One thing I'll say, though, just given kind of the history of these sorts of projects that need relief from the Board of Appeals and a permit from the Planning Board, is the Board of Appeals, and I'm not saying anything out of turn or anything that's a surprise to folks. I don't think the Board of Appeals is going to make a decision without even more clarity from the Planning Board. So I think, Meredith, I think you're right that understanding what the state of the zoning relief is going to be important. But I also think that the Planning Board, the Board of Appeals, is going to look to the Planning Board's expertise on a lot of these issues. And so I think that one way or the other, the board's going to have to make a decision on kind of what's in front of them, or the applicant is going to have to make some of the changes and some of the concessions that the board has kind of indicated that are priorities for it. But I do concur that understanding what the Board of Appeals pathway for this project is I think necessary at this point.
So, Tim, historically, what type of information does the ZBA want a planning board to determine? Like,
I think if you kind of harken back to the 440 Granite Avenue proposal, is kind of one of the more recent examples. The necessity to go back to the Board of Appeals for that project was effectively a use variance. The allowed uses in the business district are all the various commercial uses, but multifamily housing or mixed use is not allowed. And so you've got to go to the Board of Appeals, and they've got to give you a variance for the use. And there may have been some parking kind of rolled into that. The Board of Appeals, and I don't want to speak for them. They make their own decisions on their own kind of merits, but has historically been a little, I don't think they want to be in front of a decision to change the zoning that would allow for, a large impactful project, and have that, and not as, I don't mean that in a way that they're trying to pass the buck, but I think that the issues that they are looking at from sort of the use variance perspective versus the issues that the planning board is looking at via site plan approval are different. And all of the things that relate to the impacts of a project on traffic, on lighting, on stormwater, on all of this stuff are things that tend to be adjudicated, at the planning board through site plan review. And so I think when the Board of Appeals is looking at some of these decisions, they're like, well, sure, we could grant the use variance and we can kind of rationalize that and justify it, but also, are we enabling a project that is going to be, detrimental from the perspective of things that the planning board is looking at and the Board of Appeals isn't. And so not that it's like, who wants to go first, but more like, these decisions need to be made in kind of lockstep, and those kind of deliberations need to happen in a parallel fashion.
Yeah, because I am sensitive to the applicant, going back and forth, because I've had to do that and that's tiresome and costly. And I don't want to make the applicant have to do that. So it would be nice to know, really what our purview is. And my understanding is a change of use is not in our purview. That is in the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I would think that the ZBA would have to first decide if well, they have already decided that a restaurant use is good there because they approved the plate. They amended the variance to approve the plate. So the question is, they would have to go back and approve a bar. Right, so that's a change of use, a bar use.
I don't know if the distinction between those types of restaurants rises to the level of use in the way that we talk about it in kind of land use and zoning terms. It's a business use, it's a commercial use, it's a restaurant use, serving food, serving alcohol. The sort of the particulars of this is the way the plate is different from Marbella, I don't think rises to that level. That being said, understanding, the sort of the body of variances and amendments that kind of make the Milton marketplace the thing that it is, within that kind of corpus of decisions, where does it say, okay, restaurant here, serve liquor, these hours, we want to make sure that, it's not as simple as, there's been a lot of discussion about, a residential zone. I think one thing to keep in mind is that this property, the zoning, residential versus commercial, these are lines on a map. This has been a commercial property for decades. As a practical matter, this is an extension of the business district. Where these distinctions become important is how we permit things. It's a much more straightforward proposition to say, under the business district zoning, restaurants and allowed use. I mean, this is why, the Novara process 10 years ago was, arduous, because it was a big deal. It was a kind of a vacant property that was going to have a sort of a high volume restaurant in it. But from a zoning perspective, it was very straightforward. You're allowed to have a restaurant here. That's why it was site plan review and not special permit or variance. This is a lot more complicated because even though the business use has been there for a very long time, the way that it's been enabled is kind of much more complicated and complex. So I think, again, just having that clear understanding of, Maggie, you put it, pretty succinctly, what's the jurisdiction and what's the purview of the planning board. One thing that I'll argue, or I don't want to say argue, but one thing I'll just note is, something as something like the hours of the operation, that has tended to be adjudicated via amendments to the variance, for the fruit center. There are a number of them talking about hours of operation for different business uses in that project. And
Right.
so that's one thing where, when you look at what are the standards for approval for site plan approval, site plan approval, again, this is a tricky one, but it is really, really concerned with kind of the physical changes to the site and the physical changes to the structure. And sort of the farther afield you go from that in terms of regulating hours of operation and the opening and shutting of windows or the decibels or whatever, the more you get into kind of hazy territory of, is this really in our jurisdiction? Again, all of that being said, this is a property that, exists via a tremendous amount of zoning, because you're in a residential zoning district, these are the very kind of stringent and specific, restrictions that we're going to put on this property. And that's why you see in that variance or in those variance decisions, things that go as kind of detailed as the hours of operation for this business versus that business. And, we want to change that and change that. And so I think that's, again, another thing to kind of have a very clear understanding of, because, for the abutters, I get this 100%, it doesn't make a difference to someone that lives next door, whether this is a planning board thing or a board of appeals thing. We think that the restaurant's going to be open too late. We get that. But making sure that the body making that decision, and that's why that coordination between the two approvals needs to be tight, because you don't want to be sitting here regulating something that you're not allowed to regulate,
Exactly.
when really what you should be doing is corresponding and making your kind of, this is the type of thing that the Board of Appeals wants to know. It's like, look, we get to regulate hours of operation. Planning board, what do you think is appropriate here based on your public hearing, based on your experience, permitting other projects like this.
Right. So Cheryl, and then Jim, and then we'll just speak to Mr. Modestino.
Yeah, I do think that given the extended hours here, 7 days a week and until late into the evening, is a lot different level of potential impact than a breakfast and lunchtime operation. I do think it needs Board of Appeal review. I do wonder, though, if the building commissioner, who's the zoning enforcement officer, has provided any guidance on this. And then, though I do think it needs zoning Board of Appeal, I don't think that we need to stop our process. So I also just want to respectfully remind us that we have another agenda item and a consultant waiting. And so I would say that we should continue this to a date, certain as we're required to, but I don't think that date certain should be pushed out to wait for a zoning Board of Appeal to start their process.
Great, thank you. And Jim?
Yeah, just at risk of sounding redundant, the way I understand it is we're looking at site plan approval, we're reviewing the bricks and mortar, but we need to take into consideration the hours of operation to make our decision, but we don't have the sort of legal authority to set the hours of operation. But the way I understand is we should let it be known what we feel are the hours of operation. So that's yeah, I'll just stop right there, but that's the way I understand this happening. And if I'm wrong, somebody please tell me.
No, that would be correct.
So Meredith, would you like a motion to continue this public hearing to
Yes.
the 21st?
That's what I'm, just to give time.
Right, for outreach and.
Right, since we do have some things on our agenda on the 7th. Would that work for the applicant?
Can I just make one other suggestion, Meredith? There were questions raised tonight. There were, direct abutters who spoke. And so at that meeting or at that hearing, it would be nice to have responses to our concerns and comments and those of the direct abutters.
Absolutely, yes.
So I would make a motion to continue the public hearing for the 10 Bassett Street site plan approval to November 21st at 7:05.
There a second on that?
Second.
Okay, and does that work for the applicant, just to make sure?
I think the schedule is fine.
Okay, great. All right.
Wait, Meredith, just to Cheryl's point about getting a letter from the building inspector, who is the code enforcement officer. I've had lots of experience dealing with them, and in the past, it was outlined very clearly to the applicant what is needed. So do you think, Tim, between now and in a week or so, our building inspector could put together a letter and send it to the applicant to give them direction. Because, you know, it is kind of a messy process, and I do sympathize with the applicant, that it is a messy process. And so any more clear direction might be helpful.
I think it's probably appropriate for the building commissioner to take a look at this. I do not think that it could be turned around in a week. I really do, and this is why I said this at the start of the hearing. I really do think the applicant needs to kind of come up with a theory, for lack of a better term, of change for this set of permits, because it is a very long and very complicated history of, you know, variances and amendments that were issued, variants and amendments that were declined, amendments that were approved, but the work was never done. And so I think it's a little bit of, you know, it is ultimately the building commissioner's responsibility to kind of assess, you know, here's a building permit application. This has the necessary zoning relief that it needs. But as a practical matter, it really, he will need the applicant's assistance to untangle, you know, some of this stuff. You know, it is a long history. Some of the records are, you know, not digitized. And so I really do think the applicant needs to sort of give a long, hard look through the history of amendments and kind of present a clear idea of like, okay, this is the relief that we believe that we need. You know, it may turn out that they don't need relief. That would be a pretty interesting discovery. But it is something that, you know, they're the holders of these decisions. They flow to them, and they're going to need to come up with you know, something to help guide the building commissioner in terms of, you know, putting the puzzle pieces together.
Great. And Jim, you had
Yeah,
one
real
more.
quick, while we're talking about the building commissioner and conditions, I'm really concerned about enforcement. You know, so the fruit center puts in a great ventilation system, and you know, 6 months down the road, it's not being cleaned. There's complaints, it smells. You know, who enforces that? How does it actually get enforced? Is my question. And I guess, can we ask the building commissioner that? You know, because I'm just concerned that a year from now, all this stuff gets forgotten. You know, kind of like with the valet parking at Novara. It's like, it's just not being done. Okay, big deal, whatever. It's a condition that is not being done. So what happens? My concerns. You know, is that a building commissioner sort of answer? Or is there more that we have to do? So
And
legally,
that also involves the Board of Health. I had not been aware of the amount of strong odors, the offensive odors coming from the prepared foods. So this is something that I do think needs to be addressed. So, and it would be Board of Health, but Tim, probably the building inspector as well.
Yeah, I mean, the building commissioner is the zoning enforcement officer and is responsible for enforcing the provisions of, you know, the various permits that are issued by the planning board and the Board of Appeals. I think, you know, and this is, I don't want you to take this as a criticism. I want you to take it as kind of a way to kind of think about, you know, how your permits are drafted. You know, the planning board drafts the permits and drafts the conditions, and kind of, you know, the building commissioner is your kind of hands out there in the world. And I think to Cheryl's point about having kind of measurable, you know, monitorable conditions rather than kind of operational things, and, you know, whether we want to use the valet parking as an example or other ones, I think, you know, the more that we can talk about the physical design of this building and, you know, things that can be observed, I think, you know, the opening or the closing of the windows is a good one. I mean, the building commissioner can walk by and see it's 7:30, the windows are open. I got to go in there and, you know, bust these guys, you know, versus some other kind of operational thing that, you know, is much harder to enforce. I think so. It's all about thinking critically about like, how is a person, you know, working in town hall going to go out there and actually get this thing done? Because otherwise you're kind of setting expectations that are kind of doomed to fail out in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
totally
So
agree.
this is great. We want it to be a win-win for everyone. We want it to be a success for the restaurant. We want it to be a success for the neighbors. So it's just a matter of how we get there. So. Okay, so we have a motion and then we have a second. So we'll do a roll call since we're remote. Jim,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Maggie,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Great, thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming. And we can now move to our old business, which is the discussion of the MBTA community zoning. And I think, do we have Zoe here? Or who do we have tonight from UTL?
Zoe is here. Zoe, do you have anyone else on your team with you?
Yes.
Oh, JT's here too.
JT is joining as well.
Great.
And at the moment, my video is paused. If you're okay with that, that's fine with me, but
We're not okay with it, but there's nothing to be done. So
okay.
fine.
Understood.
You should be able to share screen just fine.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. Welcome and apologies for our last meeting that it got late and we weren't able to hear your updates. So we look forward to hearing from you tonight.
Thanks for accommodating the reschedule. And we'll go ahead and share screen here. Okay. So for tonight, we have quite a bit of content. We're going to try and get through most of it pretty quickly and sort of treat it. There's a couple places to kind of pause for discussion, but please do interrupt us if there's something that you're not understanding as we're presenting. And JT and I will kind of be passing off between the two of us.
Right.
So just as a refresher, I know you guys have all seen this many times, but this is kind of where we stood at the end of last year in terms of the districts that we were looking at. So when we refer to these, this is what we're speaking to. The last time that we came before you with some adjustments, we had really just numerical changes and sort of shifting between Elliott Street corridor and the Granite Ave and East Milton districts. So we'll come back to this kind of in relationship to the new things that we've been exploring, but just for reference, this is the 2023 warrant article. These are the changes that we made based on kind of planning board advice, I guess a couple months back maybe now. And that results in, slightly adjusted overall numbers and to just refresh on the shift between East Milton subdistricts and the Elliott Street corridor. It's about a 400 and change unit shift between the two to kind of rebalance kind of the scale of impact in each setting. So 430 units less of modeled unit capacity in the East Milton subdistricts and 412 more modeled units in the Elliott Street corridor. And the only district change in terms of like location parcels included is the Granite Ave South removal of the I'm blanking on the name of it at this moment. Maybe Tim, you can help me.
Heritage Hall?
Yes, thank you. So that's the only kind of like physical modification other than sort of tweaking the zoning parameters.
So did you look at 5,000 square foot lots in the Elliott Street corridor or no?
We will show you today some analysis of that. The previous time when we showed you the impacts, we just modeled a reduction to 6,250. So today we'll show you some other kind of alternatives to consider in terms of the lot size and how that relates to the Elliott Street corridor boundary.
Great, thank
so
you.
stay tuned. Okay, so the next thing that we are going to show you today is looking at a handful of potential additional districts that were raised from the planning board. I think the collective, the impact that we're trying to kind of explore with these is, can these help to shift more burden off of East Milton in terms of the number of units that we are modeling to, allow to be built in those locations? And so that's kind of the experiment that we're running. Is, if we hold everything else constant, and we just look at kind of either swapping this in or using it to reduce unit numbers, what does that impact look like, both in terms of the East Milton impact and in terms of the town-wide impact. And then last but not least, in terms of, the district that we're talking about potentially adding, what does that district have to look like in order to kind of play its role in the overall picture? So as a refresher, the districts that we're looking at are, and forgive the sort of basic names here, but Randolph Ave 1, 2, and 3, just variations on the sort of the parcels that are included. You can see here, we've run the overall kind of acreage of those parcels, and then also the density denominator, which is when you kind of remove wetlands and other kind of excluded land. So you can see that they each have kind of slightly different stats in terms of that, and that you'll see that plays an important role in kind of the ripple effects of adding each of these districts. The other ones that we have explored are 711 Randolph Ave, 1200 Brush Hill Road, St. Pius, and Truman Parkway. I do want to just briefly flag before we get into the details that whenever you're zoning a single parcel, there's a risk that it could be considered spot zoning. And so it's not to say that we're not precluding it at this point, but should we choose to consider the single parcel districts further, it's something that we should talk about and look into further to make sure that we're not kind of setting you up for failure on that. And then lastly, similarly, just a note for further kind of exploration, if we end up going this direction, that the Truman Parkway sub-district that we're looking at here does have kind of a question that we would have to probably ultimately consult with the state about to understand if they would consider this to be contiguous, given the sort of relationship with the DCR property. So that's kind of, food for thought later on. But I think for now, the task at hand is really to understand, which of these districts, if any, impact the big picture in a way that we think is beneficial to the town overall and to the approach as a whole.
Great.
So with that in mind, I'm going to pass off to JT to kind of walk you through this method. I will just say there's a lot of numbers on here. You don't have to understand every single one. What you should really be focusing on is what you see in the kind of red and green on the far right. But JT will kind of walk you through the workflow so that you can interpret and reference these slides. And then we're going to kind of land on a summary slide that should be helpful for our discussion together in terms of kind of comparing these different districts against one another and which ones might be beneficial. So JT, you're up.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, welcome, JT.
Great. Thank you. Okay, yeah, so Zoe noted this looks a little scary, but I'll try to walk us through it as clearly as possible so we can understand kind of what the logic is here and how these alternative sub-districts might offset units in the East Milton sub-districts. And so the baseline number, the key baseline number that we're using is from this revised scenario 1 that we talked about last time, which comes to 2,568 units. So that's kind of the number that's the benchmark that we're comparing against with these kind of different scenarios. And so we considered kind of 4 different ways we could reduce East Milton unit capacity. One would be to kind of reduce Granite Ave South units, as many units as possible until the overall townwide density drops below the minimum of 15 units per acre. And so what that comes to is 150 units. So once we drop below 150 units on Granite Ave South, the townwide density drops below 15 units per acre. And so that would result in 72 units saved overall, because right now with the scenario 1 revision, we're at 222 units in Granite Ave South. And then the other 3 kind of ways we could reduce East Milton would be to replace East Milton Square, which would, reduce East Milton Square to 0 units, replace Granite Ave North, or replace Granite Ave North and South. And that would result respectively in, 339 units, which is what's currently sitting on East Milton Square, or saving 133, which is what's sitting on Granite Ave North, or 355 units, which is the number of units on Granite Ave North and South combined. And so in order to kind of hit the numbers for townwide overall, that's kind of the variable that we're going to be playing with in these different alternate sub-districts. And so the key difference here is townwide unit capacity, what the changes are townwide if we take units from East Milton and put them in these, potentially new sub-districts of varying sizes, right? So that's kind of that's the game here. And so we'll go through each of these 7 different alternative sub-districts very quickly, and then we'll kind of land on this summary slide that Zoe had pointed out. So we want to move to the next slide, Zoe. So Randolph Ave 1 is, this suite of parcels on Randall Ave kind of combined, which is the biggest sub-district, potential additional sub-district that we have that we're considering here, which is 20 acres. And so that requires, in most cases, it bumps the unit capacity townwide up by a significant amount in order to maintain the minimum density. The only case in which, you keep the kind of same 15 units per acre-ish density and actually save units is replacing East Milton Square. So for Randolph Ave 2, which is just the parcels on the west side of Randolph, you do actually save units for East Milton, and then also for Granite Ave North and South, but only 32, and then Granite Ave North and Granite Ave South is the same. It's the same situation where you end up actually, adding units townwide in order to meet the density minimums for the model.
Just one thing to sort of note as we're going through these, each of these, we kind of, in order to hit these targets, right, we're setting we're making assumptions about how many units are going on this district in order for it to serve that role. So you'll kind of notice this yellow piece here. That's important to pay attention to, because you'll notice this, and we'll come back to it at the end when we discuss, in order to sort of play this role, in other words, in order to take that pressure off East Milton, a lot of these districts have to be at a pretty high density, higher than what we're currently putting, for instance, in East Milton Square. So given that most of these parcels are in more remote or kind of, areas that are more disconnected from amenities, that's important to kind of keep in mind. So we won't sort of fixate on that for now, but just kind of keep that in mind as we're flipping through these numbers.
And then real quick, Zoe, the density denominator.
Yeah.
Do we want that number lower or higher?
Good question. So it's, in general, given the particularities of Milton's sort of all the way that all of your sub-districts interact, it's most helpful to you when you have a district whose acres. So if you kind of take a look here, there's a difference between the actual real world acres of those parcels and the density denominator, meaning that, in this case, 4-ish acres of that 15.1 is unbuildable, likely like wetland conditions. And that generally results in kind of boosting your density numbers in terms of compliance. So in most cases, when you see a density denominator that is lower than your acres for the district, it's gonna help you with kind of hitting your numbers. But it isn't like inherently the density denominator number on its own doesn't really play a role one way or another. It's the relationship to the overall acres that impacts your outcomes.
Okay. Got it.
Thanks, Zoe. Yeah.
All right, on to number 3.
Number 3, parcels on the east side of Randolph Ave. Kind of a similar pattern here. We actually end up adding units when we reduce Granite Ave South by about 83. And also when we replace Granite Ave North, we end up having to add 42 units in order to meet the density minimums. With East Milton Square, again, has the kind of the greatest unit saving like result. We save 106 units by making that switch from East Milton to Randolph Ave 3.
But again, in that sort of trade-off discussion, right? Like remember that, East Milton right now is I think it's at
A very high density.
right now, East Milton overall is at 21.7. And East Milton Square itself is kind of at it, I think it slightly, I guess for if it's higher or lower density, but
16.5.
thank you. So like in order to get that, overall unit savings, we're talking about putting a density of 30.8 on these parcels, which are in a much more remote location. So just keep that in mind, right? Like it is a savings, but it might not be big picture from a planning perspective, how you want to play this out.
Okay, so then moving on from that suite of parcels on Randolph Ave, we have one more parcel in Randolph, which is 711 Randolph Ave. That is 8.1 acres. And so that kind of size, using that size to replace these, different permutations of East Milton, again, ends up kind of when you're trying to reduce Granite Ave South, you end up having to add units, or replace Granite Ave North, you end up with, a nominal increase in units. Replacing East Milton Square, given that it's kind of the same size as, the Randolph Ave 2 and 3, you kind of it results in the same savings. But again, as Zoe pointed out, it forces a density that is quite high for that specific sub-district. Same goes for Granite Ave North and South. And so if you want to breeze through the rest of these here, you're going to start to get the sense of how this works. It's a pattern. And so 1200 Brush Hill Road is 5.8 acres, which is even smaller, right? So in order to, get those savings on East Milton Square replacement or Granite Ave North and South replacement, you have an even higher density requirement. And then for St. Pius, 6.3, it's going to be, around the same trade-off. So, you get the unit savings with East Milton Square and with Granite Ave North and South, but again, requiring, almost 40 units per acre. Truman Parkway is, bigger in size, closer to the Randolph Ave 1 scenario, which requires, relatively less density bump in order to get the savings for East Milton Square and Granite Ave North and South. But still, still an increase when you compare it to East Milton Square. So yeah, this is that breakdown, in a summary form. And so kind of to kind of articulate the trade-off here, when we're talking about Granite Ave South, reducing Granite Ave South from 222 to 150 units, that results in a higher townwide unit capacity because the more acreage in the alternative subdistrict, the greater size and unit capacity. And again, that's because we have this 15 units per acre minimum we need to hit. And when we drop Granite Ave South down to 150, that's when we're sitting on the 15 units per acre minimum. And so it requires, a lot more units on the alternative parcel in order to, bump it back up. And so for East Milton Square replacement, this results in a lower townwide unit capacity. The smaller the acreage of the new subdistrict, the greater the drop in unit capacity, right? And for Granite Ave North, replacing that, this results in a higher townwide unit capacity. The more acreage in that alternative subdistrict, the greater the increase in unit capacity. Again, this is because of the density requirements. And so if we replace Granite Ave North and South combined, the impact on townwide unit capacity depends on, the subdistrict size once again, and the larger subdistricts will increase townwide unit capacity, whereas the smaller ones will reduce it. As Zoe kind of pointed out to your question, Jim, about density denominators. I know this is like a lot to digest, so we're happy to walk us through it again with any questions you might have.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of frame it, I think this is really just like a world of trade-offs. And so that this very quickly, becomes a values question of, where is density appropriate? What are you trying to connect that, potential new housing with in terms of, what's nearby? How do people get to and from, jobs and, services, things that they do every day? And so I think what I want to kind of highlight about these, scenarios, and again, if we choose to pursue these, we could of course fine tune them. We've kept it relatively kind of rigid and consistent so that we can have this comparative discussion first and not kind of muddy the waters with lots of other variables. But I think that the sort of the densities here, in what I want to kind of drive home is that in order for them to play this role, in order for them to provide the relief in East Milton, these other districts have to match or exceed the densities that we've currently considered in East Milton Square, for instance. And in some cases, they're getting up to the densities that we've explored in Granite Ave North, which is one of our densest districts. So I think that's really the big picture message across all of this, many, many numbers on here. And then I think the next sort of coming, a tier down from that bigger picture takeaway is that more than anything, this is sensitive to the acreage and density denominator of the districts that we're swapping in. So this is just highlights the sort of like it's all interlocked. Each of the districts we have right now from the 2023 article are playing a very particular role in the overall approach. And so when you start to swap in these other districts, they have these kind of ripple effects that, might change the logic or the way that we think about some of the other districts across the board. So I think with that, I'll stop talking, and I'm sure you all have questions for us and thoughts.
So when you looked at 711 Randolph Ave, did you just look at it based on the units that it's approved for right now? Or were you able to say, hey, we could probably fit 150 units on this parcel and then use that as a comparison?
We really used the number of units that it would need to have in order to provide whatever relief we're talking about on the leftmost column here, right? So we looked at, for Granite Ave, in order for 711 Randolph Ave to allow you to reduce Granite Ave South by 150 units, how many units would it need to have? So we didn't really start from what's there or what can fit, but rather in order to meet this goal, what would it need to be?
Okay, so you're saying that the plus 59 means you're putting 59 units on Randolph Ave?
No, actually, so this would be like, so if you take the town-wide, so in the 2023 article, there was the total number of units, the unit capacity across all of the sub-districts in Milton. This would, if you swap 711 Randolph, if you introduce 711 Randolph Ave,
right,
and you keep all of the sub-districts we had in 2023, but you reduced the Granite Ave South sub-district further by 150 units, in order to get back to that density equilibrium, that 15 units per acre minimum, you would need to have 59 more units across the town as a whole in order to get to that density.
Okay, so
does that make sense? I know it's like super convoluted.
No, I get it. So right now that I think there's 100 and some odd, 100 and I don't know how many units are on 711 Randolph.
Like 90.
90.
So what if that plus 59 became 90? Because that's what's going there anyway.
Yeah, so right now, so in order to play this role, in order to reduce Granite Ave South by 150, 711 Randolph Ave would need to be carrying 130 units in the model.
And is that what this presents? plus 59.
It means townwide, that's
Townwide.
59 more units than what the 2023 or what the scenario one kind of version would allow.
That's okay. I'm not getting it, but that's okay.
So that would be a positive.
Yeah,
So
no,
Jim,
I know
Jim.
it's extremely, here, let me try one more time, because I know it takes us all like a couple
I don't
tries
want to bring the whole meeting down. You guys just keep
No,
going.
it's, well, I'm
Again,
sure
okay.
there are others who
Yeah, no.
could use it,
It's
including my.
counterintuitive. And
Yeah.
the way that we have been approaching it is we're looking at sites that make sense for Milton. So, you know, so many towns have become paper compliant. And so, you know, but as you know, that means that no new units are actually ever going to be there. So we're working with a model that, you know, was no. Nobody, the town voted no on the model and the plan. So I guess like from my perspective, it's like that was a no. And so we're trying to come up to a plan that makes sense for us. So to Jim's point, that's kind of where I was going. There's 7 acres. We know there are 90 units there. Why don't we add 100 and, you know, 100 maybe, and then call that one site. That's one site. And then we move on to the next site.
Yeah, and then you would take 90 out of East Milton or 90 away
Yeah.
from Granite. It's like a, you know, and if it's not an apples to apples swap because of the density denominator or something, then you just go to Elliott Street and adjust that a little bit. So I
Yeah,
guess
so I think
I'm
because
like
this
speaking Greek
is,
here, and I don't get it, but I'll get
yeah,
there.
well, so we're totally on board with doing that. I think it's just because there are so many permutations and combinations of these, we wanted to like in this meeting talk through which, if any of these, you're like, that's worth exploring further. And then we can do that like holistic tinkering across all of these things. But like if we do that for every single box that you're seeing here, we're going to be going in circles for so long because it's going to be very you know, it's just endless tinkering that could occur. So I think what we want to do is focus in on which of these are which combinations of these are providing enough of it like an indication of a benefit that's aligned with your goals, that it's worth us taking that next step and looking at like a more, you know, complete tinkering across all of the sub-districts to accommodate a new sub-district.
So I would say this 7-Eleven Randolph Ave seems like one that we would want to keep on and
Yes.
that we would want to explore. I think it sounds like we sort of agree on that.
Yeah, no, I agree on that. Yep.
Okay, great. That's perfect. That's what we're trying to, you know, I think in this meeting just get to like, right, we have a list of 7. We can use that 7 to accomplish different, you know, different goals. And so we're just looking to kind of get some clarity around which of those are worth exploring further based on what you're seeing now. So we know we got one. I see Cheryl's
And I think
hand up.
Yeah, Cheryl, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if you could go back through the slides again. And, you know, Truman Parkway and St. Pius were shown kind of in green there. But Truman Parkway captures several single-family home parcels, and it has its complications, I think you said, in terms of the DCR property. So I guess I would suggest that if we're going to talk about eliminating some, I'd like to just like talk through this one because it seems like it's a candidate for possibly eliminating some. So can we just run through this again? And also, can you go back to like how it was the 150 unit reduction?
Yeah. Why don't we go back to
using?
the first one? Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So this kind of speaks to that balancing act of, Granite Ave South has, for the duration of our exploration of this together, served a very important purpose overall, which is carrying, bumping your density numbers up relative to what you're able to achieve within the constraints of more fine grain residential fabric, existing residential fabric. So you can kind of think of like Elliott Street corridor and the Granite Ave districts have been in a long-term relationship with one another. Like they're in direct relationship because Granite Ave is what's propping up and counterbalancing some of those lower density districts, such as Elliott.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So question. So is this based on the last presentation where 400 and some units have gone out of East Milton and 400 and some have gone into the Elliott Street corridor?
Yes, we're treating that as a new baseline.
All right. So when we talk about shifting more than 400 and some to Elliott Street, I just want everyone to understand that we've already this already is a baseline of shifting that. And there's going to be a breaking point for the Elliott Street corridor. So, all right. So now can you go to can you just run through all the sites again quickly? Sorry to make you have to do that, but it is a lot of numbers to digest. And I just want to take advantage of you being with us to run through it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't I give it a shot and we'll see how it goes. And please do stop as we're going along. If there's something that's a clarification question. So there's the net reduction. I just wanted to highlight like the colors here. So this is where the kind of the action is in most of these slides. So anything that's highlighted in green, that means it's a net reduction in units for the geography that we're talking about. So these columns are talking about East Milton, not East Milton Square, but the entirety of East Milton, including the Granite Ave, North, South, and East Milton Square. So this is what gives you like the impact on East Milton. And then these squares give you the impact on the town as a whole. And that is about like your overall units, your overall density across the whole town. And remember that there's, in most cases for Milton, the density is the thing that's hardest for you to hit. So that's where that often means when we're getting like when we need to use more units to get there, it's because we're doing it in we're doing it across more acres.
So may I interrupt you? So when you said like it's a plus 56, I think it was at 7-Eleven, that means you need to move 150, but what you're really doing is not just 150, but it's 206.
It means across the whole town, you're adding 56 more units than you had in your baseline in order to reach that goal.
So in order to move 150, you've got to put 56 somewhere else.
Yeah, 56 more than
right. Than what you're moving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And then the other piece is that I wanted to highlight as we're going through these is the yellow. So that's where, in order to reach, so this is like the goal, reduction, replacement. This is the impact. This is what you need to put on this new district in order to reach this goal. So Randolph Ave 1, for the impacts for all of these, the impacts on East Milton are basically going to be the same, because that's really what's driving this. We're trying to, that's part of what these goals are coding, but then the townwide differs. So in this case, when you're using Randolph Ave 1 as a swapping district, or as the new district, in order to reduce Granite Ave South by 150, you have to add 264 more units across the town as a whole in order to maintain your density.
At the minimum of 15.
Correct. In order to use this district to replace East Milton Square, you can achieve that goal with 44 fewer units across the town as a whole. But in order to do that, you have to have Randolph Ave 1 at 15.1 units per acre and a total of 295 units on Randolph Ave 1. In order for Randolph Ave 1 to replace Granite Ave North, you have to add an additional 221 units across the town as a whole. And Randolph Ave 1 would have to carry 353 units or 18.1 units per acre in order to achieve that goal.
So if I look at this slide, then I say, if I don't want to increase my overall for the town-wide, my best option is to replace the East Milton Square district with this district. And it's right at the mark at 15. It's not high. It's not like 40 units an acre or something like that,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's
Yeah, you basically want to be looking for
pretty good option.
green over here and
15
numbers
there.
over here that you can live with.
Yeah, I mean,
But
15
that
units an
combination
acre.
has to be good.
Right, so the
Is there one
15
where we
units
could
an
take
acre
out-
is the minimum.
Yeah,
Sorry,
and
Mary.
you could take East Milton Square off and replace it with the 7-Eleven versus
Yep, we
this
can-
Randolph one.
Yeah, so we can look at that one. So in that case, if we were to use 7-Eleven Randolph Ave to do that same move to replace East Milton
Right.
Square, because this is much smaller than the Randolph Ave one that we were looking at before, in order to achieve that impact, you would have a townwide reduction of 103 units, but this district would have to carry 236 units at 36.9 units per acre in order for it to replace East Milton Square without upsetting your minimum density.
So Zoe, for that scenario from last year, our highest density at, say, Granite Ave, north or south, was that at 40 units an acre density?
It was in the 40s. Let me pull it
It's
up.
right up there, Zoe.
Oh,
Top of the
thanks.
slide.
Well, since I'm already here, I guess. So you're asking the
45,
highest
yeah.
number in 2023 was Granite Ave North at 60 plus. With our modifications, the highest density that we have is Granite Ave North at 47.1.
Okay, so, and this would be about 37 units an acre now?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, back to 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that where 90 units are now being built, this would allow for 236?
Yes.
Does this
be a
account
zone for
for
them.
Does this account for wetlands? Because there are wetlands.
Yeah, so that shows up here. So the density denominators, there's a couple things that go into it, but the main thing that goes into it is wetlands. So up here, you'll see 7-Eleven Randolph Ave is 8.1 acres. This combination of parcels is 8.1 acres, but only 6.4 of that is developable. The other, like approximately 2 acres, is wetland or some other undevelopable area.
So this, because it's can you go back to the Randolph Ave one and the total, that was the largest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here we can keep that density down to 15 because it's a larger parcel. Is that, am I understanding?
Yeah, right. You're
Okay.
spreading that number of units across, a larger area, which means that you can kind of keep the numbers lower.
Okay.
Did we
Okay.
really want to decrease the units at Granite Ave North? I feel like that was a parcel that we all were sort of in agreement with, including the neighborhood, because that is an okay place. Number one, it's within a half a mile of trolley, and
Mm-hmm.
the impact isn't great on Milton necessarily. So I wouldn't want to see us tinkering too much with Granite Ave North, right?
Yeah, I think that we were sort of happy with
Yes,
the
so
way
can you
that
go
was.
back to where it was, your new baseline for Granite Ave North?
Granite
The
Ave,
6 stories, yeah.
Granite Ave North can't be its own sub-district. It doesn't have the size. It's
Right.
less than 5 acres.
Yeah, I thought we were gonna reduce Granite Ave South, taking out Heritage Hall and just leaving the highway land there.
Yep.
The-
So that's
That's
been
what this
done. That's
is.
part of our new baseline. So that the scenario one baseline makes that change. But I think what Tim's kind of pointing out is basically you can eliminate Granite Ave North and keep Granite Ave South, but you can't do the opposite. You can't eliminate Granite Ave South and keep Granite Ave North because Granite Ave North is smaller than the minimum sub-district size, and you've only been given the grace from the state to include it because of the relationship to Granite Ave South in the current sort of district approach.
So given that, Zoe, what were any of those options that replaced Granite Ave North and South completely skewing us with a lot more units?
So this bottom row is what kind of reports out on that. So this does, have a range of, there's only, one of these scenarios that results in an increased number of units across the town as a whole. The rest of them result in varying levels of reduction in the total number of units across the town as a whole. But again, it is shifting that from, Granite Ave North and South, which has, that relationship you were just talking about, the Granite Ave North district does, to another district that doesn't have that level of access. So this would be like putting, and these are variations, right? So we don't need to go with St. Pius, but, for the sake of illustration, in this scenario, if you were to replace Granite Ave North and South, the way to get the most savings across the town as a whole in terms of, unit reduction across the town as a whole would be to use St. Pius. And St. Pius, in order to do that, would need to be at 39.2 units per acre and 247 units.
Which is the same basically as Granite Ave South then? So I'm just trying to have people visualize, is that meaning we're looking at 4-story buildings there? Do you think?
Probably. I mean, we haven't done the test fitting of that, of how that would actually fit on the site. But I think, it would, in terms of scale, I think something that when we're kind of previewing this with Tim, something we were talking about is that, some of these densities might just create a new battle around this, similar with a similar reaction to what East Milton neighbors had about the densities that we were showing previously, in the 2023 article. So I think that's kind of the caution here, is that a little bit of what we're seeing is that, because these districts are serving this role, part of what it results in is that these new candidate districts, in order to provide that additional relief beyond what we've already done in the scenario one adjustments, they need to be at very high densities.
But but St. Pius, that is within a half a mile of the subway, correct? So that's always my personal beacon is, are you
In
with
Truman Parkway too. I think
is
they're both.
this within a half mile? Because
Neither of those are within a half a mile of subway. They're within a half a mile of commuter rail.
Commuter rail, that's it, yeah.
commuter rail. So yep, okay. So it is within a half mile. So to me, St. Pius, the site is actually a good site. So I'd like to keep St. Pius on it. I don't agree with the density of it. So, but I think it's a good site, and there's already sort of development around that area, both on the Milton side and the Hyde Park side. So I wouldn't want to dismiss it entirely as a site. I just would want to play with the density numbers.
So Zoe, how could, when Maggie says play with them, what would that look like? And
Yeah,
do
so
you
I
have an
think
idea?
I think in order to sort of look at a role that St. Pius could play that would be beneficial overall. I think it probably isn't, I think it is not replacing Granite Ave North and South, because I think that would force St. Pius to carry more density than you want.
Right.
But I think it could be supplemental. You can see kind of up in this top row that Granite Ave South reduction, that, you know, when we're looking at it just, you know, with that set, like 150 unit reduction in Granite Ave South, we could look at, you know, maybe we don't reduce Granite Ave South by quite that much. Maybe we reduce Granite Ave South by a little bit less than 150, and we look at whether St. Pius could play a role in enabling that.
So speaking of that, can you go back again to what our new baseline is and see how many units have already been taken out of Granite Ave North, Granite Ave South, and East Milton Square? I know it's a total of 430,
and
but
just to be clear, whilst I was doing that, St. Pius is not within a half a mile of Reedville Station, and only a small fraction of the Truman Parkway district is within a half a mile of Fairmount.
I think St. Pius gets in about 3/4 of a mile. Is that right, Tim?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just want to be, if somebody can go back to that slide, which shows the new baseline numbers, just because when we're talking about
So this is the
150,
shift
yeah.
that we've already sort of, you know, with the scenario one adjustments that we talked about the last time, you know, I guess a couple meetings ago, we've achieved this level of rebalancing with those adjustments. So this would be further adjusting. So we wouldn't be increasing Elliott Street, but we would be looking at, can we reduce by East Milton by more than 430?
So Granite Ave South has already been reduced by 108 units, right? Oh,
yes.
308 units. Okay.
Didn't they have 707 Granite North and Granite South? And there was only 130 at Granite North, so they were looking at like over 500, a 530. There it is.
Yeah. So you kind of, to read this like table here,
this is helpful.
The 2023, this is, you know, what was in the warrant, you know, that went before town meeting and the town referendum. This is what got people riled up. And then what we're looking at now with the adjustments we've made, you can see in the red columns. So it was, you know, Granite Ave South was at 530 units. With the adjustments we've made, it's now at 222. That's a reduction of 308 units. Granite Ave North was at 171. We've brought it down to 133, a more modest sort of decrease. So that's 38 units less. And then East Milton Square was at 423. We've brought it down to 339, and that's a savings of about 84 units. So most of the reduction that we've been focusing on is Granite Ave South, because we know there's a very real redevelopment opportunity. It's a very large site. And so that's where we've been kind of focusing our energies in terms of, you know, trying to deliver on that.
But the other thing,
I don't think anybody had any problem with Granite Ave North staying at 171. Is there a way to put that back?
Yeah. I mean, all of this is, you know, I think before we return to those kinds of adjustments, we should stabilize which districts we're considering, because it all, you know, is interlocked. But absolutely, there's still plenty of room to kind of play with the balance between those Granite Ave districts. There's a lot of subtle options there.
So there's something else that's
on that
really.
note, I'm sorry, Cheryl, just one more thing. So
Sure.
adding, you know, while we're talking about adding, I keep coming back to 648, 652 Canton Ave. I mean, it's 5.32 acres. It's 124 approved units. And I think we'll see similar, if not more, benefit to that as we did with 711 Randolph Ave. And I really think we should look at that.
Can you say those addresses again?
648-652 Canton Ave. It's basically an approved 40B right now. 5.32 acres, 124 units.
I actually don't think those are the right numbers, Jim.
Yeah, I got them off the
648 Canton Ave is
the approval.
Yeah, but
Is the, you
that
mean
is in
addresses?
land court. I think, Jim, I just think that's one that they may back off on, and it may not become a 40B.
I know, but even if they don't, I mean, if we approve it and then it turns out that it's not buildable, I mean, where's the loss? I mean, as far as I'm concerned,
Well, it
that's
would something, I mean, it wouldn't be a 40B, but it could be this, because if we're zoned for it, then it can happen. And
But if it's in land court for access, for
but
access
it,
to the
I don't know if
private
you know the
road,
location.
then
It backs up to Indian Cliffs. It's really in a residential neighborhood.
All of these are residential.
All of
I
these
mean,
are.
I don't know where you define that. Yeah, everything has an impact. And one of the biggest arguments to the no vote was we got to spread this around town. And remember, the Columbines didn't get any and all that other happy stuff. So I think this is a great opportunity. I think something is going to be built here, regardless of the lawsuit. And if not, once again, that would be the best outcome. But we take advantage of a parcel that's going to give us some real benefit.
But I think we might not need it. If we run through these and we can see, and we can always go back to it if.
Well, I mean, I didn't think we were
yeah,
going to need, what's the one down on Randolph Ave by Hillside by Maggie's house? How come I'm drawing a blank?
Yeah, the
Somebody,
cold.
the Newcomb Farm site. I mean, we looked
Yeah,
at
I
that
don't-
just in the spirit of looking at it, but nobody wants to build on that. So, I mean, just in the spirit of looking at the
Yeah,
benefit.
I don't think that's a good, I wouldn't say that's a good site either.
It's not, it's terrible, but we looked at it in spirit of looking at everything.
Looking at it,
So I
yeah.
think we want to look at 648, 652 in the spirit of looking at everything and seeing what the benefit is here. My 2 cents. Doesn't hurt to look.
That might be a similar situation to the Fuller Village site where we had to do so many units there because there's so much land, 15 units per acre. I don't know, but
So
5.32 acres. I don't think it's going to be. I think we'll find some benefit.
you have to also remember that this particular, I mean, obviously full disclosure, I live near that site, but everyone also knows that Winter Valley is expanding and the memory care facility is, we approved in a stone's throw from that site. So in the spirit of thinking about how all new development is being spread out, also there's a new school being proposed nearby. So I think we need to factor those in when we're thinking about good locations. I think before we leave this slide, so I wanted you to make sure that you understood from our last meeting that we didn't support 4 units per lot on lots that are under 10,000 square feet.
Yeah,
So
we
this
did get
number
that
needs
feedback.
to change. So
We'll
I just want to
actually
make sure.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
we'll show you some, we've run the numbers with 3 for that tier 1.
Okay.
So we'll show you that. That's kind of the,
Okay.
once we get through these new sub districts, we can return to that
Okay,
and show
because
you
I
what
just
we
wasn't
have.
sure if that was going to keep that 412 number, if it was going to change it.
Yeah, it does have an impact.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on it right now, but it still allows for the same kind of reduction in East Milton. It just is a slightly different.
Okay.
Overall.
So to be clear, and for anybody who's going to watch this, are any of the changes that we're talking about, on all these other sub-districts, we already are accounting for having a reduction of 430 units in East Milton spread between the 3 districts. And an addition of 412 units in the Elliott Street corridor, although that number is likely to change based on what I just said, which is that we want to keep a maximum of 3 units a lot on lots smaller than 10,000 square feet.
Yeah, that's correct. So all of the
Or
new
7,500 square feet, actually, I think is what we said.
Yeah, that's the original, the numbers from the 2023 warrant that was set at 7,500. And so that's part of, when we get back into, tinkering with the individual parameters, that's absolutely something we can keep fine tuning with you all. But to my kind of earlier point, it's premature to do that until we've kind of settled on which other sub-districts we're considering, because it affects everything. So it's best to kind of try and make that decision first, even though I know it feels a little bit like putting the cart before the horse.
So Joey, you're the professional. You've really spent the time, getting us to this point of this presentation tonight. You know that Milton residents have been concerned about high density districts, and residents have been interested in kind of spreading this out for purposes of spreading out impacts that this might have. So what do you think, would achieve these, what adjustments would achieve what we're trying to do without bumping our total number of zone capacity too high, or making a high density district some places just a swap out of what we had in Granite Ave?
My inclination would be to look at options that could allow you to reduce Granite Ave South further, but not consider the ones that replace your existing districts, because I think that replacement is what's forcing the high density districts elsewhere in town where it makes less sense than in the places that we have it already. So my suggestion would be to focus on this row, on the Granite Ave South reduction, and which of these districts is interacting with that goal in a way that seems promising. And so I think those, the ones that stand out to me are 711 Randolph Ave, St. Pius, and then, I think Randolph Ave 1 and 2 really don't help in that case, because it's you're looking at pretty big increases in units overall. But, I think if there's a strong, planning rationale or idea that to argue for why Randolph Ave 3, 1200 Brush Hill Road, or Truman Parkway are a good planning choice, then these numbers are also, I think, I don't think it's worth splitting hairs on numbers here.
So do you think you would do both could you do both 711 and St. Pius, or does it need to be one?
No, both.
We haven't studied the impact of combining them, but I think it would, I'm trying to think this through in my head. So Granite Ave South is generally a higher density district, and so bringing the numbers down there, I think you'd potentially need to add more. I really should just run the numbers, but I think it's worth looking at. If we think a combination of 711 and Randolph Ave and St. Pius would be beneficial in terms of
Parkway, could we do 711 St. Pius and Truman Parkway?
Yeah, we can look at those combined impacts. I do think once as we start to get more acreage, it'll start to have a sort of, if you think of right now, Granite Ave South, let me toggle back to this. Let's see.
And I agree with Jim and keeping Granite Ave, the Granite Ave North, keeping that the high density that we previously had, because I think that was, felt that was consistent with what we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we could bump that number up if we needed.
And so can you go back to why you didn't think the Brush Hill Road site where the nursing home is located? I just think of it as it's a nursing home. If it did change use, it would convert nicely to housing. But can you just run through those numbers again about why that wasn't good, or why that's not one of your recommended?
I think that one would be, I think my only concern with this one is spot zoning.
Right. Okay.
Because it's a single parcel. And I think you don't have a super strong planning logic why it is inherently different from the parcel next to it. But putting that aside, I think this one just didn't give you quite as good numbers, but it's still not, it's not like a huge issue. So this one gives you an increase in order to sort of achieve this goal. If you were using just this district to help you reduce Granite Ave South, you would need to put 83 more units overall in your kind of numbers across the town. Whereas for the other ones, you're in the 50s and 60s. So it's just a difference of, 20 units or so. So it's not like
Yeah, so maybe I would suggest looking at 711 Randolph Ave, St. Pius, and Brush Hill Road. They're geographically dispersed. And maybe it's not 150 units from Granite Ave South, but it is a reduction. But whatever sort of would need to be done in order to include at least 2, if not 3 of these. There's definitely an interest in residents in having districts that may not make as much planning sense, but they for this one,
out.
Yeah, and this one, it makes sense in the sense that the building is already, like I said, a nursing home, which could convert. So there's a building there. I mean, if we were thinking about where you might want it because of that, it could make sense.
So the
Mhm.
problem I have with that is we just finished a very long, arduous, plan for a memory care nursing home, independent living, residential living, whatever anybody wants to call it. And we just heard from everybody in town how we need to have nursing homes. So to me, it would be a shame to, if we're destroying a parcel for a new memory care and removing 300 trees to accommodate a new facility, then why are we now taking a facility that has the same exact, almost same services and converting it to housing?
No, we're not. We're just allowing an opportunity if the nursing home goes away.
I know, but that key is, we want to encourage nursing home, memory care, independent living sites, and especially there because it's so close to Fuller Village that really, if you're in Fuller Village and you need more care, there it is right across the street. So to me, and from a planning perspective, it's in the middle of nowhere. So I don't know, I have a problem with that site because of the situation we just went through.
No, I agree. There is a serious need for that, for nursing home, for memory clinic. And I think that based on that site, and I don't know if they're in the red or the black, it's not for me to say, but I think that would be a very likely candidate for redevelopment personally. So Maggie's right. We would be losing a vital service. I mean, I got to go back to my 648, 652 Canton Ave. I think that's low hanging fruit, and I think there's real benefit there. I'd rather see us look at that.
Jim,
And
you
I know-
suggested this one all last year.
Oh, no, I know. I understand. But I also
How
suggested
about
48 to 652 Canton Ave.
Right.
And nobody's
maybe-
gonna
all right.
fight on that.
I'll
you know?
also note that the board could absolutely zone for memory care or nursing home use anywhere in town if it felt that it was needed.
Yeah, but this is already here. But you know what? I'm not saying don't look at it. I'm just saying look at it in conjunction with other
Yeah,
parcels.
maybe we table this one for now and come back to it. And
I think now's the time to identify where we're gonna really hone in on, right?
So can you go back to the town-wide? It shows the entire town boundary.
The map.
The map, yeah, sorry.
We actually don't have in this presentation, I think.
I think you had one in the beginning. The
first
very
Yeah,
first
it's-
slide, maybe?
It doesn't encompass the whole town,
Oh,
unfortunately,
okay.
because of our, it's cropped to
Okay,
the sort of the
right.
part that we were looking at before, but I can, if I stop screen sharing, I can find one pretty quickly. Shall I do that?
Sure, I
No,
just think it's, part of this idea of this distribution. Well, I think we could say that we don't want the sites that are going to add a lot of new zone capacity that we're not required to do. So if we wanted to look at process of elimination, well, it's always getting the map up. That she seemed to say that the Randolph Ave one was one of those, right? So I think several of you have already said you don't like that site anyway. So, but for the purposes of why we don't like that site in terms of this, is that it requires too much in the additional zone capacity.
right, the numbers, it pushed the numbers
Right.
townwide overall. How does everybody feel
that's-
about possibly trying to eliminate East Milton Square?
Rather than Granite Ave South, but we have to have Granite Ave South.
We have to have the south and we have to have the north. But East Milton Square,
I think we should look at both, Meredith, just to see what it means.
I mean,
yeah,
I
both
mean, I
options.
have looked at
It-
both here, but
what it would do to eliminate it, and the only reason why I say is because it would not necessarily be commercial, and we may risk losing some of our commercial base. and risk some tear downs. And we're doing the overlay zoning there. And
Yeah, so if we put a dot on where St. Pius is, it's near that circle in the middle with the two commuter rail stations, right? It's just
yeah, this is helpful.
it's a little down from your arrow, the next circle. Yeah, it's in that area, right?
That's the area. So I personally would like to focus on the areas that are within the half a mile of our commuter rail and our subway stations. To me, that makes sense that we're following the statute. And
so Brush Hill Road is closer to the commuter rail than 711 Randolph Ave is.
right. So my first thing is going to the statute, going within a half mile, but I'm also want to take advantage of what is being built already. So you know, I'm a big advocate of this is supposed to be transit-oriented development. We're supposed to be half mile. And this is, I think, precinct 10, and precinct 10 voted for MBTA zoning. So for all those reasons, I think we should focus on, you know, some development in those areas.
I think you should not use a criteria of how precinct voting went whatsoever. I think that's
But I think I think we agree. I think we all agreed that these are good locations for
right. I'm just saying the logic for that, though. I don't think that's something that we should be doing. But I would say that
a quick clarification point. I think it's absolutely good from a kind of big picture planning logic, but in terms of the statute, because you're categorized currently as rapid transit, the transit area that applies to you is from the Mattapan trolley and other subway services. The commuter rail is, again, good planning logic. I think we absolutely should be thinking about it, but it won't like get you any extra credit according to the guidelines or the standards you're being held to currently.
Yeah, but
obviously that might all change.
This might also relieve a little bit. I know maybe not a lot, but I think having smaller scale development, you know, these are great places for like 3 families, allowing 2 families to convert to 3 families. You know, the missing middle that everyone's talking about. I think these are the areas that would be good for it. And maybe we don't get a lot of numbers, but I think from a planning perspective, it makes the most sense.
So Maggie, it sounds like everyone agrees that 711 Randolph Ave and St. Pius are ones that they should go back and continue to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't sound like there's consensus for Brush Hill Road. And we already talked about you want to go back to this? I think you asked us, Zoe, right, to eliminate some, right?
Yes, I think I think the if we're looking at ones that help with the Granite Ave South reduction and the I know Meredith, you had mentioned a desire to also look at the East Milton Square replacement scenarios. That's these top 2 rows. So thinking about, if those are the goals that we'd like to continue evaluating, which districts have a good planning logic that we feel good about continuing to pursue, like what we were just talking about. And then on top of that, which of those are, according to the numbers, also, playing a role that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I think we could eliminate the Granite Ave North replacement. I don't think anyone wants to replace that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That sound.
And I think
the Granite North and South replacement.
And therefore we can't do North and South, just like Meredith just said.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we can just eliminate those two lines.
Bottom 2 rows are out.
Right.
Yep.
And then within this, we've already talked about 711 Randolph and St. Pius. We've been back and forth a little bit on Truman Parkway.
I sort of like that option.
Yeah, I like Truman Parkway.
Okay.
So in this scenario, Randolph Ave 2 and 3 is not a bad option for East Milton Square replacement. Is that right, Zoe?
Yeah, I think they can play a role in that. You can see that, all of them have the same impact in terms of the unit reduction town-wide. It's really about which of them has a density that feels, when it serves that role of replacing East Milton Square, which of them has a density that feels kind of comfortable. So if, 233 and 28.7 units per acre feels like roughly workable, it doesn't have to be perfect. We can obviously tinker a little bit, but if that feels like that's, serving a purpose that makes sense, then that would be something we could look into further.
And can you go, I think when Tim first spoke to us about it, he said the 131 Elliott development is 40 units an acre. So
yeah.
So the 28.7 that you would have to hit, do you think that could be done in 3 to 4 story is in height? I guess, the density per acre, at whether it's 30 or 40, it really starts to come down to how big are these buildings, right? For, in terms of how they might fit in.
And the topography, because the 40B at 728 Randolph Ave is 40 units per acre, but that sits down a little bit.
Well, the 7-Eleven has a lot of topographic change, and so those buildings are going to be sitting up on a hill and be pretty tall. But the the Randolph Ave. Can you go to the map for the Randolph Ave sites again?
Actually, I have them all together on one side. Yeah. Let me do that.
So Randolph Ave 3,
is that A. Thomas?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess I'm wondering, are the same sites the best replacements for a reduction in Granite Ave South and an East Milton Square replacement? Are we looking at different sites for those two strategies?
I think they have slightly different dynamics. You might kind of think of, you're talking about kind of potentially looking at, adding 2 to 3 districts. I think in that world, you might be able to think of it as one of those districts is enabling you to pull East Milton Square out of the equation. The other one is enabling you to reduce Granite Ave South. So I think it might be helpful to kind of think about them as like a specific district serving a particular purpose.
So I guess I'd be interested to see when you go back and run numbers, what's the lowest density that we can get on alternative sites in 2 different scenarios. One is reducing Granite Ave South and the other is reducing East Milton Square. And it might be that they're different alternative sites in both of those options. I don't know if we've got that because maybe it's some combination that you haven't looked at, or do you think you know what it is based on your analysis thus far?
Yeah, we can do a quick kind of scan through here and see if we can find them. So if we're looking at kind of for Granite Ave South, to kind of toggle through these, looking at the zeroing in on the density numbers rather than the kind of units. Randolph Ave 1 performs pretty well as a replacement for East Milton Square in terms of density. Randolph Ave 2, slightly less because you're focusing on a smaller area. Randolph Ave 3, we're looking at higher densities here. I think we're starting to get in an area where it might be misaligned with neighborhood expectations. 36.9, so inching up. 40 for Brush Hill Road. 37 for St. Pius. 28 for Truman Parkway. So I think, for replacing East Milton Square, the district that does that at the lowest density is the largest district. So basically
So
that's
that's
what, you know,
Randolph Ave 1.
Randolph Ave 1. So that's, you know, it's not to say that you inherently have to go with that one because it's giving you the best number, but that's kind of the equation. So when you're looking at replacing East Milton Square, because East Milton Square itself has a particular size and density, you're kind of looking for another district that can be similar to it, like has a similar area and can support a similar density.
So what's the acreage for this Randolph Ave 1 again?
Randolph Ave 1 has a total acreage of 23.8, but the important thing to pay attention to is the 19.5. So that you can see that's a pretty good match for East Milton Square. So East Milton Square's density denominator is 20.6. Randolph Ave is 19.5. Those are very close to one another. That means that it can come in at a similar density and play a similar role.
So
for
we
the
have no
town.
other district that's that size in these alternate districts. That's why this is the only one.
Right. That's why this is hitting it because it is a very good match for East Milton Square as it exists currently in the kind of scenario 1.
So maybe
version
it's
of
a
this.
reduction of East Milton Square and not a complete elimination.
So I keep going back to it, and you guys are going to eventually kill me, but 648 Canton Ave is a 16 unit per acre density.
But it's not 20 acres, Jim. It's like
Oh, I know,
7.
but it's over
So-
15. It's 16. I mean,
But
we're
it-
making a big
So you
mistake
might
not looking
think
at
about, so for these ones, the lowest acreage we have is the 1200 Brush Hill Road. That's 5.8 acres, right? So when we run, if we were to run the site that you're talking about, Jim, it might perform in a similar way to this one. So it's not a perfect match, but if we look at, for instance, how many units did you say it had?
Hold on a second. 124 on, no. Yeah, 124 on 7.7 acres.
116.
116. Thank you, Tim.
7.7.
And the only way to know is to run it.
Yes, and I think I can give you a pretty close answer live here because it's really just a numbers game and we have ones that are pretty similar. So like I'm not saying we won't run it, but I just want to, because we're in this mode, I want to give you something to go off of. So Truman Parkway might perform closest. That's 8.1 acres. So it's still a little different, but if we were to look at the district that you're talking about, Jim, it might have a similar impact. In other words, in order for it to facilitate the Granite Ave South reduction, it would need to have 163 units-ish. So like the 16 isn't going to be enough is more or less what I'm saying. We would need to enable it to have a little bit more than the number of units that are proposed on it currently for it to serve one of these goals, probably.
So it wouldn't replace it entirely, and that's why I think smaller districts are better. It's more keeping with the town.
Right.
So, you know, I know there are so many other areas in town that we haven't even looked at. You know, so I hate to get too into the weeds, you know, especially when a court decision hasn't been decided yet. But so that's just my
But I think we're beginning to understand we don't even have to pick a site in some ways. You can pick an acreage and what Zoe just did.
yeah.
And so I guess so to Meredith's question was some reduction in East Milton Square and some reduction on Granite Ave South being offset by maybe some of the smaller districts that we talked about, like St. Pius and 711 Randolph Ave.
And increasing keeping the north.
Keeping north what it was, right?
What it was.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think that has potential to work, Zoe?
Yeah, I think we can take a look at that. Are there any districts other than 711, St. Pius and Truman that we should keep looking at?
Well, I think with this one, you should tell us what's the best combination to get us the closest to 15 units an acre. Because we know that that's what we need to hit, and we really don't think there's an appetite for, high density in some of these areas.
Yeah, okay.
That's,
And if we're
that's
hitting
enough for
the
us to work
units, yeah, when we get to the Elliott Street, I think if we could reduce some of that to 3 rather than 4.
Yeah, so let's jump into
Because if we're over in our
that.
unit,
So I
that
think
might be dragging our numbers down. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to show you, we run the numbers with like something that with some of those updated parameters for Elliott Street. But before we get into that, we do want to show you kind of a similar decision-making support series of slides to just show you that interrelationship of the district boundary, which is something that I know we've talked about, potentially revisiting, looking at whether we make small adjustments to it, and also the minimum lot size, because there's an important kind of interplay between the two, because of this sort of numbers calculation component of this planning exercise. So I'm going to have JT walk you through this. This basically just shows you the relationship between minimum lot size and district boundary, so you can see what the implications of that might be. And then we'll get to the running the numbers with some assumptions.
Thanks, Zoe. So here is the June 2023, the warrants kind of district size as it relates to the parcel size minimums for Elliott Street corridor. And then what we're going to do is we're going to walk through, progressive reductions down to 5,000 units per square feet to see how that changes the boundaries of what is developable in the Elliott Street corridor. So you want to move to the first
and
slide
just
here.
a super quick note. This is
Yeah.
when we put this together, we were kind of teeing up that initial decision, right, of like where we were going to draw the boundary. So this is when we were first working on this. This was part of the framing, as this interplay between your large parcels and your small parcels, and trying to kind of match the way that we're drawing the district to recognize those sort of constraints and those aspects of your neighborhood pattern. So we came up with one solution in 2023, but we might come up with a different solution now if we're kind of making different assumptions. So here we go.
So on that note, so once we hit like about 11,616 square feet with 4 units lot max, the density drops below the minimum of 15 units per acre. So we reduce kind of that like maximum square footage as the threshold to 20,000 square feet. And so that's what you see in the gold kind of parcels there. And then the red, Zoe, go ahead.
I was gonna say, you can kind of think of those like these kind of like golden parcels are the parcels that if you include these in your district, they will result in your district density dropping below what it is in our numbers right now. So those are, it's fine to include them, but you should understand that they'll have that impact. There's no way to avoid it as long as we're capping it at 4 units.
Right. Right. And so the kind of the pink parcels are parcels that would be below like a 7,500 square foot threshold, and therefore the ones that are in turquoise are the ones that would be, developable under this scenario, right? And then
so you basically want to be looking for like what gives us the most of this teal,
right? The highest yield of that blue. And so when we drop it down to 6250, that's a kind of a slight increase. You see, not a huge difference. And then one step further down to 6,000 square feet, you're starting to see a bit more of a change in developable kind of sweet spot turquoise parcels. And then 5,000 is where, that drop, you really see the drastic kind of increase in the boundary of developable parcels under these parameters.
So this is kind of the full spectrum of kind of like, where you might set that minimum parcel size threshold, from kind of the lowest, which most closely matches the parcelization that you have, but may be
Right.
smaller than what you want for a 3-unit development, up to 7,500, which is where we were at the end of 2023 in terms of the parameters that we had for this district. So I think our question to you is maybe like first and foremost, what you think that appropriate minimum lot size is, and then we can take a look at that map graphic and talk a little bit about boundaries with that in mind.
So we heard from a lot of folks in last year in this district who were concerned about losing open space, and if we had 5,000 square feet and 3 units in the parking for them, would we be able to keep the parameters like the open space requirement that we had in the zoning last year, which would be some protection against, loss of open space?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, which, if it worked, maybe you could get 3 small, it might limit the size of the units, but I know that the model, also would flag something if it didn't think it would work, right? Because it's based on the 1,000 square feet per unit, which, it might say that we'd have to adjust something like the open space in order to make this work. Is that something that you have thought about?
It is. We haven't run the tested that. The 5,000 square foot lot is does comfortably fit, for instance, a triple decker, but it typically does so with a slightly more kind of urban build out condition than what I think people would like in this neighborhood and expect. So I think we can certainly show that kind of relationship, but I do think at this 5,000 square foot, it fits. It's very functional. It's a comfortable, like for the people living there, it's comfortable, but I think it's not matching the open space expectations that people have for this neighborhood. So I think probably 5,000 is too low if that's the main standard. We can do a closer look at what is that trade-off, but I think just as a baseline, I think 5,000 square feet is not going to line up with those expectations.
Which is why we moved it to 7,500 last year.
Right.
Which
I
is
think
why
the question is whether there's a reduction. So if I kind of bump up to that 7,500, right, are we comfortable going to 6,250?
So it
Are we
seems to
comfortable
me,
going to 6?
yeah,
That
I
kind
mean,
of-
it seems to me 6 to 6,250 is more realistic, and I think it also needs to be looked at, what does that do? How many, instead of 400 and something, is it still say 400 and something, since it's not 4 and it's 3 and it's 6,000 square foot minimum lot? But I spent some time looking at this district last year and felt like it was going to be 5,000 was going to be tough to keep the open space. And parts of this area are have really small parcels, but they still have some open space. So I think we'll be looking at changing the character quite a bit if we don't keep the open space. So I, for one, think the 6,000 square foot threshold we should test out a little further. I don't think the 5,000 is going to be workable.
And can we just go back to what we had in 2023, what was on that? Because I thought that turned out, it looked good, relatively good. There were a few things
so
I would
this is it. So what you're seeing here, the black, the sort of thicker, solid black outline here, that is the district that was submitted in 2023. So all of the parcels that fall inside that black line, those are the parcels that were included in the Elliott Street Corridor district. And you can see that there are, parcels that are below that 7,500 square foot threshold. That means that they would not be able to take advantage of this particular zoning overlay. They would need to come in under the base zoning because they don't qualify for this. So this is kind of the 2023 state of affairs is this map.
So
And it was
Zoe,
7,500.
yeah. So Zoe, why is the area, there's a section that is not in the historic district and it's not in any of the districts. And it's, I guess, there, Brook Hill Road, West Side Road. It's
Yeah.
over by Central Ave. What if that were included as part of the district?
Yeah, so that's one of the things of, there's kind of, so you can kind of imagine here, right, if you're gonna expand this boundary slightly, and you maybe think of it in terms of this buffer, right? So the 1,200 foot buffer here, this is intended to kind of give you a sense of, distance to the train stations. If you were to kind of follow that, there's some, blue parcels that we have not captured that are within that radius. Some of them, like, these roads here, that's a lot of parcels that are below the minimum to reach out and include, just to get, 2 parcels that, can be included. But like you point out over here, there's maybe some that are more obvious choice of maybe you extend along Valley Road and Gaskins Road. Maybe you extend a little bit along Central Avenue, a little bit along School Street, Brook Hill Road, Morton Road, as you mentioned. So there's definitely some tweaks that we could look at here. I think the original logic was that because it was sort of more patchy in here, there's a lot of those smaller lot sizes sprinkled in here. That because of how sensitive your approach is to these density issues, if you include a larger area, most of which cannot take advantage of this zoning, your density for the district as a whole drops even lower.
So what about if you go to your 6,000 square foot map, does that change? How does that change those areas?
So it starts to change the calculus a little bit. So that's why the sort of the lot size threshold is like the first question, and then the boundary is the second one.
So wouldn't it be good to have a smaller lot size and keep the open space? Because then the likelihood of development is decreased.
I mean, it depends on your goals, but I think the model will catch if the parameters that are entered don't allow you to build enough building area to accommodate 3 units at an average of 1,000 square feet. So there's a chance that that could result in the impact that you're talking about, Maggie, but there's also a chance that playing that game will result in the model catching that issue, that conflict, and you'll end up with a lower density outcome in the district as a whole.
So I think it's worth looking at 6,250 or even 6,000, and then a slight expansion of the district just because of the lot size change. And see where that gets us in terms of unit capacity.
Can we see is there a 6,000 map?
Yeah, I'll toggle to that now. So this is the 6,000. So you can see between the two, if I kind of toggle a little bit, that there's, it's not a huge number, but there's a fair number of parcels that come back online if you go down to 6,000 from 6,250.
But I would want to test 6,000, just again to kind of see.
Yeah, make sure it's not, getting you to a point where you're not able to achieve the open space goals. Yeah.
And hit the compliance model requirements.
Right. And I would love to test just doing 3 units. Because I think that's where you get into, if you build another 2 units behind, a property or on the same site, that's when you lose your land. But I'm really concerned with what I'm hearing happening in Newton, that developers are just opting to tear for 4 units. it's worth tearing it down, the cost and rebuilding the whole thing. And they're seeing a tremendous amount of tear downs right now.
Yeah, so why don't we, I think with that in mind, does the board generally feel comfortable with that as a next step, that we'll take a look at the 6,000, 6,250 thresholds and boundary changes that line up with those, keeping the open space goal as the primary constraint that we're planning to.
And three
And the 3
units.
units, yes.
Right.
So I'm gonna,
We would keep.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we'd keep the question is, we would keep the open space at the same percentage.
Yeah, that it was in 2023, like hold that constant and make sure that we can retain that with these lower parcel sizes. And if we can't, we say that parcel size is too small.
Okay, so previously with a parcel size of 7,500 and we had I can't remember the percentage of open space off the top of my head.
40.
40%, yeah, that's what I thought. And so keep that at 40%. So if we go lower, we're still keeping 40%.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Can we
because I
put a
would.
parameter of a maximum lot size? Or is it just minimum?
That is a good question. I don't actually know. We haven't used that for any of our properties.
I just think of like on Cliff Road and Norway, there's some really beautiful single family homes that, you know, I just wouldn't want to risk tear down on those.
Yeah, I mean, I do think this is I won't speak too far in this direction because it's you know, I'm not an economic development specialist, but I will say if it's a beautiful single family home that's almost like an estate, is like on a larger parcel, the chances of a 4-unit multifamily ever being worth more than that is very unlikely. But I'm not saying it could never happen, and it is something that's worth considering and preparing for. But I do think it's a pretty low risk because those are so highly valued now, given how beautiful they are and how much people want them.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah, but from our
yeah.
standpoint, Meredith, you'd know this better than anyone, from it, like a home on Cliff, if, you know, one of the big brick ones, if a developer came in and did 4 condo or 3 condos in it, that the value could surpass the value of a single family house.
right. And what's happening is they're assembling, and you can assemble and then you can get 12 like really large condos, which are now selling for $1 million. You know, they're expensive, the condo market right now. So that's what they're doing. They're replacing the single families, assembling and doing condos.
Well, we have to have a minimum of 3, so let's run the 3. And
right, that sounds good.
I don't think there's a lot of large lots based on that mapping that they've shown us, right? So
Yeah, I mean, if we go back here for a moment, let's take if we start from the 7,500 one. So the district was designed to exclude these larger parcels because they really bring the
Drag
density
down the
numbers down.
numbers. Right.
So the all of the parcels that you're seeing within this district are less than 20,000 square feet, because all the ones that are 20,000 or more are in this gold color. So these are kind of the only cases where we couldn't really avoid including those larger parcels because they're kind of embedded in the middle of a district. So there's just a handful of those ones, and there's probably, you know, within here, there's probably a fair number that are at, you know, let's say 15,000.
Right.
Is there a particular like number range that you are thinking of?
For units or for
like the large lot sizes that you're concerned about?
Yeah, that's what I just was looking.
Can I jump in there? I mean, if we go to 6,000 square foot lots, my fear is that a developer would split the lot if it's like 12,000. So maybe it maxes out at 11,500. Is that what we're talking about? A maximum lot size?
Well, that's what I was asking. So can we put a minimum and a maximum?
Yeah, so the max would be just under the 12,000. So you wouldn't be able to split the lot, save the existing estate, and then put up a 3-family next to it. You guys follow me?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
why
where
don't
will we
we,
land on a
Maybe
minimum?
yeah, maybe
Not-
that we'll just put a pin in that and come back and see if we can, if we're able to do it that
I
way.
think right now, these are mostly under, so I think
Yeah.
it's worth looking at a slight modification of the boundary based on a lower size minimum and see where that takes us
Yeah.
as a next step.
But it just would limit assemblage if we were able to put a maximum on.
But we need to see what lots they are.
Yeah,
I mean, there may
yeah.
not, it may not be, you
Right,
know,
right.
something that's needed, I guess, based on looking
Right,
at this.
exactly. That's why I sort of thought I liked where we had it. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, but I think we have to go more dense to make up for the rest of the town in this district, unfortunately.
I mean, we have already, so I think there's also, you know, even with these, you know, right now we had run with 6250, so there's a chance that we don't need to keep making, you know, more changes, but let's take a look at sort of, we ran the numbers in a slightly different way, based on some, you know, some tweaks that we thought might make sense, from what we were hearing. Again, this is not intended to be like a final, you know, suggestion, but just to give you a sense of like the range of impacts. So this is kind of like our new baseline. This is what we've been showing previously with those adjustments, you know, removing the parcel in Granite Ave South so that it's a smaller district, reducing the parameters for East Milton Square, Granite Ave North and South, to bring the unit capacity and densities down. And then these changes in the Elliott Street corridor tier. So this is the one where we had keyed in on, right? We don't want to have 4 there. We want to have that first tier, those smallest parcels, be limited to 3 units. So we went ahead and took a pass at making that change, so bringing that down to 3, just for the sake of giving you a range of outcomes. We also tried running that with the 6,000 square foot minimum lot size, just so you can kind of see what that starts to look like. And then the other thing that we did is, because we have changed the numbers here in terms of the number of units that are allowed, and the lot sizes, we adjusted the FAR down to be more restrictive, in order to provide a little bit of added protection, given that we're, you know, allowing more units. We want to make sure that it's not happening in a way that's too bulky or out of sync with the scale of development around it. So that's just kind of an added protection there to kind of keep it in scale. So with that, we still are coming in good shape to kind of toggle between, we had 2,568 and 15.2. Then it goes to a little bit fewer units with this overall across the town as a whole, because your density is slightly better. So you're able to reduce your overall number of units because you're more aligned with that density numbers across all of your sub-districts. So what that would look like if you kind of compare that with the 2023 warrant. So this one had 2,586 across the whole town and 15.1 density. So 2,550. So you have like a small reduction there in number of units across the town as a whole, in addition to that shift between which part of town is carrying larger numbers of units versus smaller. So that shift looks like this. So in this scenario, there's a smaller gain in Elliott Street corridor, but there is, we're still able to maintain the same reduction in the East Milton districts. So that 430 unit reduction. So this is kind of the, you know, if we were to go with these parameters, this is kind of the shift that we'd be looking at between those, between East Milton Square and, East Milton overall and Elliott Street. That would be slightly different if we, for instance, you know, adjusted this back up to 6,250 or to 7,500.
So that still keeps the open space requirement that we had, Zoe?
According to the model, yes. I will
Okay.
say that we would want to do a test fit of it, knowing that that's a priority for you, that this is not an area of strength for the model in terms of its actual prediction of built outcomes. So we'd want to do some actual drawing work to confirm that that sort of pencils out in your parcel fabric.
Okay. Well, I think it's better to have the 3 units and 250 square feet on the lot size. I guess, sort of doing the fit out analysis could help determine whether that's going to work. But I do think it's better than where we were in the last scenario.
Okay, well, I think that's all we have for you. I think we have some
Great,
pretty
Zoe.
clear next steps. So I just want to repeat them back to you to make sure that I have them right. So in terms of looking at new sub-districts, we're going to take a look at 711 Randolph Ave, St. Pius, and Truman Parkway with the goal of using those to support further reductions in Granite Ave South and East Milton Square, but we're not going to look at them as replacements. We're just going to look at them as a tool to reduce East Milton Square and Granite Ave South numbers.
The one thing I was wondering, I mean, I think those are the focus, but I do, and I don't know how much more work it adds, but I wonder if at this juncture, we should still keep all of the lots of the alternatives locations
Right, with the
in.
idea of the lowest density, like.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then have one more look at that before eliminating any.
Mm-hmm. We can do that.
Okay.
And then the other
bringing up-
set of work that we would do is around the Elliott Street corridor refinement. So we take a look, we do like a test fit on a 6,000 square foot lot and a 2,250 square foot lot, holding that 40% open space constant and confirming that it's possible to fit 3 units with associated parking without infringing on that 40% open space. And then we'll use that to inform which of those thresholds is appropriate, and then what boundary changes might make sense based on that.
If
That
you
minimum
also,
square
if
footage.
you could include the FAR in your analysis.
Yep.
Okay.
And we were going to increase the Granite Ave North back to where
The
we had it in
2023 numbers.
2023.
Okay, yeah, that's a good reminder. Okay.
That's great. Zoe, thank you. This has been great.
Good, I'm glad it's been useful. We
and thank
can
you,
coordinate with
JT.
Tim about the next meeting that would make sense for us to attend, and kind of go from there, unless there's one that
Is
you
the
have in
7th?
mind.
Is the 7th, would you be available to come back then?
Yeah, I think there's a chance we might not be able to get through all of that analysis, but I think we can show you enough progress that it would be productive. So let me check.
And maybe we could put, Tim, maybe we could put Zoe and JT on first, and tomorrow set our public hearing at like 8 o'clock.
Yeah, because if we're doing it is 10 Bassett on the 7th. I've forgotten already. No, that's not to the 21st. Okay, because I was just
You know what? Actually, before you get too far, I misspoke. I do actually have a conflict with the 7th. I have another meeting from 6 to 8. So that not ideal. Sorry.
No,
that's right.
If you were on the same night as 10 Bassett Street, it's kind of the East Milton people who would be at 10 Bassett, so they could actually hopefully listen in on this.
So the only thing, do we need another meeting, Zoe, before we present it on the 14th at the public forum?
Yeah,
Because we maybe could just have a meeting just separately just to meet with you, Teal, on MBTA.
I think we can work with, wherever we'll take our cue from you about how you want to use that forum on the 14th. I think we can help support you in presenting wherever you are at that juncture in a way that
and we
makes
can,
sense. But
it's a
if there's
point
a
in time.
specific
Yeah.
goal that you have, we're happy to work with you to try and match that goal.
No, because we're not expecting it to be a finished product for that forum, but just giving people an update on where we are, and the direction, getting feedback from residents. So
I
guess
think
we
one
don't
of the, just if I can jump in there,
Yeah.
one of the important things is for people to understand the trade-off, how these adjustments work, on a high level. Because there's a lot of questions, about why this district or that district, and why not include this. And just having a high level discussion about land area density, unit capacity, how they're influencing these district locations, I think would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, you're all veterans now of the trade-off game here, but
Yeah.
not everybody is at that point in this
Right.
process.
Right. Okay. Well, this has been great. So I think we will plan just to meet on the 14th unless we feel, unless you need us, Zoe, to meet sooner and have other questions for us. But
I think we're fine. I think we can probably coordinate via Tim to make sure that we're giving you what you need for that, the forum on the 14th. And we're, I think, planning to be available should you want us there. So we should just make sure that we're on the same page about what it is that we're presenting, but I think we can probably do that without necessitating a meeting.
Okay.
But I'll defer to maybe to Tim on that, if that makes sense.
Who exactly would be presenting?
I think Tim and I had talked about having you Teal present. You've been, you're so familiar with running these numbers and questions that might come up. I think it would be, sorry, printer's going on. That if Zoe and JT could sort of lead it, that would be great.
So
and just presenting just as if you did tonight with us.
Yeah, okay.
I think my inclination would be for you to kind of set the tone of what you want the meeting to be about and what you want people to focus on, and then we can provide that technical grounding for everybody to get them oriented, help them understand where we are. But I think it's probably important that you facilitate to some degree, because you're most familiar with the specific issues that people have been raising and are concerned about. But we're certainly happy to, do a similar presentation to what we did tonight, probably a little bit less in the weeds on the numbers because people will probably, their eyes will glaze over, but yeah, happy to help
Sort of the
support in the way
direction
that makes
we're moving.
sense.
Yeah. That sounds good. All right, Tim.
So
did you
Meredith,
have
I think one of the, if we set the stage, if you will, for Zoe and team is, what the feedback that we think was heard at the end of last year, with the plan that was approved and then, with the referendum vote. And then, what some strategies are to shift some of the zone capacity and still meet the requirements, right? So that's kind of, shift some from East Milton, from Granite Ave South, from East Milton Square, make some fine tuning in the Elliott Street corridor, take a look at some of the other alternative sites, and then get into the technical. Because I think what we're trying to do is to adjust the districts, which takes into considerations people's concerns, but still compliant in terms of this particular scenario.
Yep. Okay. So I think we're good on that. So if anyone doesn't have anything else at this time, I think we can have a motion to adjourn.
do we need to move this to a future date or no?
No, we're gonna meet on the 14th. And then probably have them, maybe come back on the 21st if we have time on that schedule, but. Yeah, no, it's not, this isn't a public hearing, so
Okay, so thank you, everyone, and I make a motion to.
thanks.
So just one quick thing, Tim, this will be available on the town website and soon, this presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Second the motion to adjourn?
Okay, roll call, Jim,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Maggie,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you again, Zoe and JT.
Thank you
Good
all.
night, all.
And Tim, thank you.
All right, so long, everyone.
Good night,
Take care.
everyone.
Good night.